Got to grab one fairly important thing whenever I was moving all my shit back here.
Nice. We're live though. So welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of Wick TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, we've got a bit of a show for you today. Usually, I sit back, I jump in sometimes, but I'm more of a moderator role. I guide discussions, I lead discussions, I ask interesting questions. That's fine. But lately, Lactoid's been wilding on Twitter. Okay, he's been saying shit. He's just been typing things, whatever comes to his mind, and he doesn't filter and he just hits send. Okay, and I had a few issues with some of the takes he's had recently. Basically, he said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Democrats are the true threat to democracy. And I obviously disagree. So I decided to make a show of it. Thanks for coming, Lactoid. Really appreciate you. We got JebTan to back up Lactoid here. And we got Vigilante to back up me. And we're going to try a little bit of a different format. But I wanted to just introduce the topic and give the mic to Lactoid to start, to give his opening thoughts. Then we'll go to JebTan, and then we'll respond, and then we'll get into it. If you end up liking this kind of content, let me know. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, send me money. If you ask some super chats, I'll make sure to ask the question to the panel. Or if you're asking me, I will do my best to answer them. Thank you. Lactoid, mic's yours. Go ahead.
Yeah. So just, I guess, a minor correction, which is that what I alluded to in my tweets was that Democrats are a threat to democracy. And not necessarily the true threat, but I think I'll defend that point regardless. I definitely think that they're more of a threat. So in the sense that they're the true threat, for sure, I'll defend that here. So specifically, and I know there was an abortion tweet that you had questions about too, but specifically regarding the democracy one, the tweets were alluding to a recent hippy-dippy panel, which apparently is Trump a threat to democracy was the debate question. And the entire debate kind of descended into debating about what the meaning of threat to democracy was. I'm sure that the meta conversation is going to seep into our discussion here a little, but I'm hoping that we can kind of stem that by allowing me to provide two working definitions that I was sort of referring to when I'm talking about Democrats being a threat to democracy. And I think Democrats fit both of these definitions quite well. So in my view, a threat to democracy can mean either one, organizing or using a system to limit actual voter options and establish legal but oligopolic control, and two, using arguably legal mechanisms to undermine critical elements of the functionality of the US government and the Constitution. I posit the Democratic Party and its allies and subsidiaries fulfill both of these definitions. The first definition being fulfilled by such actions such as the utilization of superdelegates to undermine primary elections, lawsuits to force RFK to stay on the ballot in swing states, while also simultaneously trying to allow Biden to be off the ballot in said swing states, and lawsuits to force Jill Stein and Cornel West off the ballots across the country, and the removal of Donald Trump from the ballot in Colorado, culminating in the pressured removal of Biden from the election and the unelected ascension of Kamala Harris, despite her widespread unpopularity in the first primary, which I already know one person here, one Democrat, has a problem with. So there are some issues even among the members of the Democratic Party when it comes to this action, because they recognize it as being undemocratic. The second definition is fulfilled by the lawfare perpetuated against Donald Trump, pressuring social media to censor opposition to Biden's policies, as recently explained by Mark Zuckerberg, and repeated lawfare. I wrote that twice, repeated lawfare against Donald Trump, and the appointment of non-originalist justices and the consistent threats to pack the courts as pushed by both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So I'm willing to defend any of these specific claims, and I think they're all correct, but especially that last one, threatening to pack the court, I think this is the single biggest threat to democracy in terms of the functioning of the United States Republic that is being perpetuated by the Democratic Party and its allies.
Okay, thank you. I have some thoughts, but let's give it to JebTan first, and I'll use my prerogative of being the channel owner to go last. But go ahead, JebTan. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, so my view is a softer one than the claim that Lactoid's being made to defend, but I think it's closer to what he believes anyway, which is that both can be threats to democracy in their own ways, but that Democrats are at least as much a threat to democracy as Republicans. The reason being, while artificial lines get drawn where with Hillary Clinton, so to speak, where she conceded the election. So any other delegitimizing actions or words that she has had toward democracy or our voting system are pretty much null and void because she conceded the election. So I don't like that line. I like the working definition Lactoid's operating under. And we see it with multiple manifestations. Not only was there the Russiagate scandal, there was also the active suing to get RFK off the ballot until he conceded, which they are now suing to get him to keep him on ballots because their only goal is to engineer an election that gives them the best chance to win. And unless people's argument is as long as they go through legal channels to do that, they're not a threat to democracy, then I would say that Donald Trump is not a threat to democracy as long as you look at his earnest lawsuits and his self-proclaimed earnest thought that all of this is legal and good and his willingness to go through the legal channels in order to work some of it out. And Democrats are also a threat to democracy going as far back to the 2000s and the 90s in their rhetoric. I think the conversation we were having with the hippy dippy was sort of the, who is at fault for political division? While I don't think any one party is at fault, I don't think Democrats get to play the game that Donald Trump is the only one who has thrown rhetoric off the rails. When we had Mitt Romney and John McCain, who were the pictures of civility politics, and Obama decided to basically be the breeding ground for this new concept of Democrat leadership and campaigning, which is to paint the other side as a misogynist, a racist, a homophobe, no matter who they are, or what they say. And it's demonstrated that they are not going to stop saying the things they say about Trump, about Republican nominees, even when those nominees are no longer Trump. They demonstrated this when it looked like Ron DeSantis was gaining steam. They demonstrated it again when it looked like Nikki Haley was gaining steam. Every single one of them, they had arguments at the ready that they were just as bad or worse than Donald Trump. So I think all of that shows the Democrats are at least as big a threat to democracy as Republicans are.
I have thoughts for you as well, but we'll get to them. Vigilante, go ahead.
All right. So with Lactoid's working definition, I actually like Lactoid's definition that he brought up. However, I would argue that the Republicans have done significantly more, especially in Republican states, to do quite a few of those things, especially when it comes to suppressing voters. You could see that in Georgia, you could see that in Florida. Ohio, the state that I live in, has done it. Any Republican-led state has constantly made efforts to suppress voters. This is something that happens constantly, whether it's making rules to make it harder for people to be able to access voting, like blocking mail-in ballots, or whether it's purging the ballots, literally purging voter registration days before the election, which is something that my state, Ohio, is guilty of doing. As far as the second part, there are some stuff that I agree with both of them on, but there are also a lot of things I disagree with, specifically Lactoid on. I would say the only thing Lactoid said that was relatively accurate is probably the very last thing that he said in his opening. And that's probably the one thing that I'll come out the gate and grant him here. I don't remember what he said off the top of my head. But
how are you granting it to him if you don't remember it?
I
said it, so it must have been right. I mean,
I guess it's just
I pulled up my
court packing.
No, yeah, the court packing thing. That's what it was. I pulled up my notes late, so I didn't get a chance to type it down. But yeah, the court packing thing, I could agree, is a potential threat to democracy, no matter which side does it. And right now, I would argue the Republicans have already done it. So,
okay. Well, thank you for that. And again, thanks for being here. Real appreciate you helping me out here. Again, I wasn't sure if this was going to be a one-on-one or a panel situation. We were waiting on someone else to give us an answer. They never gave us an answer, so we're just rolling with what we got. So here's my initial thoughts on this, okay? So I would recognize that Democrats are not perfect. I'll give you that off the jump, right? That Democrats have done things I disagree with. Democrats will continue to do things I disagree with. I am not someone who is thinking that my party can do no wrong and the other party must do everything wrong. I'm not that kind of guy. So yes, any time that they threaten to pack the courts and things like that, I fight against that. When they threaten to remove the filibuster, I fought against that. And you'll see me doing that over and over and over again. But when it comes to the specific claim that Democrats are a threat to democracy, I take issue with that. I think while, yes, they aren't perfect and they do things that are not the best, when we talk about what a threat to democracy is, it's an action or a policy or a habit of doing things that, if successful, would end democracy or severely hurt or limit democracy. None of those actions that you take, that you said, even packing the courts, would end or severely threaten democracy. In fact, the Supreme Court itself is anti-democratic, but that's by design, right? That is by design. The Supreme Court is meant to be a check on unmitigated democracy. So packing the courts being a threat to unmitigated to democracy just does not make sense. In addition to JebTan's point of Democrats using divisive rhetoric, well, no shit, Sherlock. This is part of how this goes, right? This is part of how politics operate, and there has never been a time where each side doesn't try to cast the other side as the worst possible thing they can think of. Now, what that worst possible thing is changes based on generations, based on the culture and the time, right? But for now, every election season, you will hear two things from the extremists of the parties. The Republicans are Nazis, and the Democrats are commies. That's what you're going to hear. That isn't a threat to democracy. It doesn't limit our ability to vote or cast our vote. When we talk about suits to keep people off the ballot, yes, I agree. That's not good. We shouldn't do that. We should not have tried to keep Trump off the ballot. And to that extent, I think that the Democrats do bear some blame. But when it comes to as a policy positions as a whole, we can look at the parties and we can compare. We can compare what Trump has done and tried to do and has said he will do, and we can compare what the Democrats have done, have tried to do, and has said that they will do. And I think that when you weigh these things, it's clear that Trump is the threat to democracy. And while Democrats aren't perfect, they're a much better alternative. And that's my opening statement. But here we go. We'll open it up and let's talk about it.
So this is my thing where it seems like the only argument that the Democrats aren't a threat to democracy is, well, I can point out a thing that Trump did that was worse. If Trump, because again, that's all subjective. Say if once Trump is out of the Republican Party, once
is it subjective? What do you mean by that?
It's subjective, like saying what is worse, right? Because you're saying that Trump's issue that is easily waived, not only easily waived away by courts with judges he appointed, but also the democracy ends up practically becoming strengthened by those court decisions. I could easily argue that that is less a actual practical threat to democracy than when the Democrats make it commonplace to sue to get legitimate electable candidates off the ballot when they're running, but then once they've dropped out and endorsed the other candidate and they know that the votes would split more toward that candidate, then suing to keep them on the ballot, which is something that is legal to do, something that provides a sort of systemic incentive to do so in the future if they succeed. That's a lasting threat to democracy. That is creating a pattern and a norm. As you've said, this is how politics runs. It adds to the library of awful things that are, quote unquote, how politics run.
So
which
you
is
do know that Republicans have brought suit to keep Harris off the ballot. You know this, correct?
Which Republicans? The leader of the party?
Which Republicans?
The leadership of the party?
Which Democrats have done that?
7 Democrat states, I think, at this point have now done it.
So I understand that that's bad,
Yeah,
but this isn't unique to the Democratic Party. This is something that both sides have been doing for quite, like, this is something.
If the Democrats do it more, if they do something that is a threat to democracy more, would they not be more of a threat to democracy for doing so?
You are assuming that they are doing it more. Can you show me that they are?
these are lawsuits. These are public.
I
There are
understand.
more Democrat states that have sued to both get RFK off the ballot when he was running and on the ballot now that he's not, than there were Republican states that sued to get Kamala Harris.
Wait, hold on real quick. I'm looking this up. Apparently there were some threats, but no suits were actually filed.
Yeah.
Were there any suits actually filed?
I am looking to see if the suits were filed, but this again, we forget that she just got the nomination like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. At this
RFK
point.
just dropped out less than a week ago, and Democrats have already completely flipped their legal strategy to suing to get him
Can you
on
show
the
me the
ballot. knowing
lawsuit that
he's
they've
dropped
filed
out.
to keep? Hold on. Can you show me the lawsuit that
Sure,
they filed?
this was recent.
You can bring up not only the RFK one, Jeb. You can also send him the Cornel West and Jill Stein. In my state, for example, Jill Stein just won a legal challenge against the Democrats that was supported by the Republicans, right? Which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Republicans actually intervened to prevent Jill Stein from being removed from the ballot in my state. So this just happened, right?
So
and I'm not seeing any lawsuits actually to keep Kamala Harris off the ballot.
So now so beforehand, North Carolina, I believe, Wisconsin, and 5 other Democrat states were suing to get RFK removed from ballots. Now RFK is taking action to get himself removed from ballots in 10 states. And the Democrats are suing to not allow him to take his own name off of the ballot.
In which state? I'm looking this up.
He wants off in 10 states and some battleground states.
Yeah, Wisconsin. I'm saying Wisconsin rejected his request to withdraw. According to Wisconsin law, any person who files nomination papers and qualifies to appear on the ballot may not decline nomination. If they're just following their law,
Michigan. Well, if the Democrats are suing in cases where it's not explicit state law, that would be the Democrats taking an active effort to
which
take
state
a
are they
candidate
suing in?
that.
Well, just to be clear, like under the definition you proposed, Wick, which I don't actually agree with, but under the definition that I proposed and the definition that you proposed, whether or not it's legal or not is irrelevant, right? Because the question is it anti-democratic to do it under the categories that I've defined, right?
The question would be,
arguably packing the court is legal, but it's definitely like a threat to the Republic.
I'm not talking about packing the courts here. I'm talking about the removal from the ballot. JebTan made a claim that the Democratic Party has sued to keep him on the ballot. But I'm looking at these states, and what it seems to me is that the various states have different laws on their ballots. And for Wisconsin, for example, they have a law. It's specific in their law that any person who files and this is a claim, again, whether that's true or not, this is the claim that they're making, that any person who files nomination papers and qualifies to appear on the ballot may not decline nomination. And if that law has been on the books for a while, is it honest to call it a threat to democracy when they're just following the law that's been on the books for a while?
Sure.
So
okay.
Does
that make sense?
Sure. Let's pretend that it didn't
happen. It depends who's pursuing it, right?
Sure.
So So I have number one: organizing or using a system to limit actual voter options and establish legal but oligopoly control. Like legal is critical here. Like if we're not referring to illegal actions here. Arguably, anybody can sue each other for any reason. Like Jill Stein, for example, the basis for that lawsuit was. The argument was that Jill Stein didn't have enough presence in the state, and therefore she shouldn't be considered to be a candidate. Now that challenge was recently shot down, right? Because the law was, I guess, opposed to the DNC on that particular regard. But again, the question is, what effort is being made here? What threat is being made here? Why do the Dems want Jill Stein off the ballot? Because they don't want people to be able to vote for her for their own political needs. That's why, right? That's why they're trying to remove her. Now, that they could be using legal means, just like Eastman argued that he was using legal means during January 6th, right? There is like a legal avenue that you can argue for all sorts of shit that you and I could agree would be a threat to democracy or anti-democratic, whether it be through limiting voter options or undermining an essential element of the Republic.
I'm with you that, yes, suing to keep people off the ballot is not something that I would approve of. I think it's bad. I don't think they should do it.
Right.
My point here is that this is not unique to Democrats.
No, I know. So I know that's your point, and I knew this would be the point before we even started this. But I just on the examples I've listed out, I just want to point out that the things that I listed out, you have almost agreed that all of them are bad, or you've avoided calling them anti-democratic, but you said like I disagree
No,
with them.
some of
they're
them
not
are
good.
anti-democratic, but the claim you are making and the claim you made is that they are a threat to democracy. And I don't think any of these things
Yeah.
will end democracy, nor will it severely limit people's ability to engage in democracy. And so,
Okay.
Wait, if they literally
whereas-
can't
which
vote
is
for who they
different-
want to vote
which
for,
is
how does there
different.
not?
Hold on.
How does that
Because
not
they
limit their
can.
democratic ability?
They can.
Well, here's the problem. The problem here is that this definition, if you want to roll with this definition, I don't think January 6th would fall under this definition because that
It was an
wasn't
attempt
actually
to overturn people's votes.
well, and this is an attempt to remove somebody that people could vote on the ballot. I think the
Do
likelihood
you
of
understand the
this
difference
succeeding,
between the two things?
no, so you have to look at severity, but you also have to look at likelihood, right? I think that there's a much more concerning likelihood that people are going to get removed off the ballot. I think that there's a much more concerning likelihood that the courts are going to get packed. A lot of people, including myself, argue that this had no real chance of going forward, even if legally Eastman had an argument. And it's actually somewhat legally unclear. The 12th Amendment might actually provide Mike Pence the ability to do what Eastman was arguing that he could do, but there was all sorts of other checks and balances that actually prevented him from going forward with doing that. But when we're talking, I don't have this definition of threat to democracy where it's got to end it right now. And in fact, it's interesting because
Or severely curtail it.
Sure, or severely curtail it. It's interesting because this was actually the position that the pro-Trump side was taking on the last debate was like, this is the definition that you have to meet. But I agree. I don't think you actually have to meet that definition. I think that a threat to democracy is just simply, as I defined it, right? It means that organizing or using a system to limit actual voter options, to push to and limit actual voter options.
But under
right?
that
Or
definition, the Supreme Court's a threat to democracy.
No, so
Yes,
again,
it's limiting people's ability
the definition is two parts. The definition is two parts. Using arguably legal mechanisms. Using arguably legal mechanisms to undermine critical elements of the functionality of the U.S. government and its Constitution. The Constitution sets up the Supreme Court. Now,
so if it's in the Constitution, it can be anti-democratic, and that's fine.
Under your
absolutely, because again, we do live in a republic, and when we refer to the democracy, we're often referring to constitutional mechanisms like the third branch of government, which relies on not being packed in order to be functional. If you pack the court, you've obliterated the court, right? Like every single time the president gets in power, they're going to put stooges into the Supreme Court and just have rubber stamp everything they want to do. If we're going to start this precedent of packing the court, and I know that you're against packing the court.
I am against packing the court. I think it's harmful for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that it's basically. Remember when maybe you're of age, right? When you were in trouble, your dad told you to go out and get the switch, okay, and you bring it in. That's what we're doing for the Republicans. We're getting them the switch that they're going to use to lash us. Because ending the filibuster, Trump tried like hell to do that. He pressured McConnell over and over and over again to end the filibuster. Like when Republicans claim, right? Yeah, when Republicans claim though that the Democrats are the party that wants to end the filibuster, that's not necessarily true because Trump tried his level best to end the filibuster as well. Like
but the Republicans were the ones who stopped him
McConnell
from
was the
doing
one
it.
who stopped it.
Can we just let me establish right here.
Leader of the Republicans.
But the Democrats also stopped the Democrats.
On either side.
JebTan said
the
before.
Extremists on either side that want to get rid of it. So
JebTan said before, and I agree with this, that both parties are arguably a threat to democracy in different ways, and I don't disagree with that. What I'm trying to establish here is that. What people are like saying very strongly, Trump is this unique threat to democracy, or he is the threat to democracy. When we talk about the threat to democracy, this is what Trump represents. And what a lot of people's responses are is, here's all the ways that Democrats are a threat to democracy. I'm just looking for, you can say that, well, I think Trump's a threat to democracy too. I just want to hear you guys say, sure, Democrats are also a threat to democracy, and then we can have an argument about who's the greater threat. And I got arguments on my side here.
But here's the deal with doing that, right? It's asking us to create this level playing field, which I don't think is level. I think that, while yes, we can point to things that the Democrats do that are quote unquote anti-democratic. I'll just grant that. When we look at what Trump has done and said he wants to do, it is far and away worse, and it feels dishonest to equate the two. So yes, I can say that both punching someone in the face is violence, as well as poking them lightly could be violence. But it's weird to call them both violence It's very
Well, hold
weird.
on. I think both
right?
of them have like I think both of them have like an actual realizable harm here. So it'd be like two people get punched. Now the question is to decide who punched harder, which I think is a good thing to explore. Which is what I want to do in this debate, like actually explore which party
Mhm.
is like proposing the worst things. Right? Again, with court packing, I think the Dems are way worse. But what I really want is you just said that yes, the Dems are doing things that are undemocratic.
Yes, and we
If that's
oppose that.
true, great, and you oppose that.
We
I know you
stop
do.
that, right? And I'm a
Great,
Democrat.
great.
Okay.
I'm aware. I'm aware. But then this must mean then that if they are doing undemocratic things, right? Would you agree that like they are a threat to democracy, right?
No.
They are. There's a threat there to do undemocratic things if
Not a
they're doing
realistic
undemocratic
threat
things.
or a realizable threat.
Really? You don't think that there's a realizable threat when they are actively suing to remove people from the ballot? I know you don't like that, but how is that not an actual threat when they are currently in litigation to remove Jill Stein from various states? Jill Stein, who ran not only this election, but last election. And there was no issues there
Does it
in my
stop
state.
someone from voting for them?
If they get removed from the ballot, I guess they could write her in. Hey, let's remove Kamala
Yeah, you
too.
can still vote
And
for it.
then if you wanted to vote for Kamala, you
Yeah,
could write her
yeah.
in too.
It makes
Of
it
course
harder,
that's a threat to democracy.
but
yes.
again, unless you are arguing that they are actively throwing out, because this was my problem with the Colorado case. The Colorado case where they tried to remove Trump from the ballot, they also said that they would throw out any write-in for Trump. That I think is your strongest
Wick.
case.
Wick,
But when you
Wick,
look at things,
let's not pretend that write-in candidates have anywhere near the same accessibility or fair shot as any other candidate. That's ridiculous.
Are we
The
pretending
write-ins,
that the third-party candidates have a fair, have a realistic shot here?
if their name is on the ballot, they have a much higher chance of getting a higher percentage if they get above certain thresholds.
Wait.
Like 5%.
If
If
Jill
they-
Stein's
if
on the
they-
ballot, you think she has
if
any
they
chance?
So, for example, one of the reasons why I voted Libertarian past two elections is that the Libertarians get above 5%. They qualify under certain rules for a certain government participation, right? Because political parties are sort of these pseudo-private, pseudo-government entities. They qualify for certain kinds of government privileges, and they qualify for debates. They qualify for
People
different access to debates.
have won with being a write-in candidate. You know this, correct?
Let me ask you this then, Wick. Would you think it's undemocratic if the Republicans sued to remove Kamala Harris off the ballot, but they allowed her to be a write-in candidate? Would that be undemocratic at all?
Of course it would be, but we look at degrees. I think that it is anti-democratic to a degree, but I think that, again, I'm using another Democrat example. You shouldn't fight me on this. The one where they said, okay, even the people who write in Donald Trump, they're going to cast that. That is so far and away different. That's on a different level, a different scale. It feels weird to use the same word for both.
No.
This is what I don't like. I don't like the flattening of terms. I don't like the flattening of words. I don't like the flattening of concepts where anything like, as JebTan was saying here to get more people in, and I'll let you in, Vigilante. I see you chomping at the bit. But JebTan's being like, well, what they called DeSantis a racist homophobe, and that's a threat to democracy. Nah, get the fuck out of here. That's not a threat to democracy. That's just politics, baby. Right? Why is that a threat to democracy? I'm really curious.
Oh, I can answer that. Yeah, no, 100%.
Please.
So when Trump was sowing distrust in American institutions, that was considered a threat to democracy. When Trump was the one, they said it was a threat to democracy when Trump would criticize the media. So if it's a threat to democracy when Trump would criticize the media, doesn't matter.
Of course,
we're not having
matters.
this conversation. It doesn't. We're not having this conversation.
Before we get into Trump, just to be absolutely clear on my position. Yes, I would agree it's anti-democratic to remove somebody off the ballot and then also throw away any write-in votes. But it is undemocratic. It absolutely fits the definition of undemocratic. There doesn't need to be the whole throw away the write-in votes. It is absolutely undemocratic to remove their name off the ballot. When you're a major party like Jill Stein is,
would it
like
be
she
undemocratic
with the percentages that she's getting nationally.
Hold on, that doesn't make sense because again, it makes it less likely. The argument you're making is that by taking her off the ballot, so they have to write her in, it makes it less likely that she'll get a vote. Is that your argument?
It makes it astronomically less likely that she's going to get a vote.
It literally
by that
adds
same
an obstacle.
argument. By that same argument, you could say that putting out a huge ad, spending millions and millions of dollars to to run a full court press at ads, get influencers in to make these things, makes it less likely for someone to vote for a candidate and therefore is undemocratic. And I reject that premise.
It doesn't put an obstacle in people's way to voting for them, does it?
Yeah, it seems bizarre to me. Like this is like
you would never. Yeah,
this is clearly an obstacle. But like if we put chains on the door to the polling station, everyone here would agree this would be undemocratic. But I guess you could go get bolt cutters.
No,
you could cut the chains. You could cut the chains.
Like, it's a fucking pen. You take the pen. You're right.
Sure.
I don't know. You also have to drive to the fucking polling place.
Republicans get Kamala removed from the ballot. Republicans get Kamala removed from the ballot, but you can still write her in. Is that undemocratic? Yes or no?
She never won a primary. Let's just take her off the ballot.
No, it's fine. It doesn't even matter. No. Say she did win a primary. Who cares? There's no obstacle being presented here. It's basically a campaign ad. Is it undemocratic to remove her from the bottle? You just said if you can argue that it's undemocratic
because by your logic, putting out an ad to make people less likely to vote for a candidate is undemocratic. And I reject that premise.
It would not be undemocratic to run on removing Kamala from the ballot and to successfully remove Kamala from the ballot. That would not be undemocratic, you're saying.
It would be more undemocratic than...
it wouldn't be
than a campaign ad? Probably, huh?
Hold on. But it would be less undemocratic than throwing out her vote.
Who cares? That's not what we're saying. You're drawing the imaginary line, throwing out the vote.
What you're doing is you're flattening the term. You're flattening the term.
I'm equating.
You're
Vigilante, stop. We're having a very direct line.
Whether it's undemocratic or anti-democratic.
It is against democracy.
Yeah, undemocratic, anti-democratic. I'll just cop to that. But the reason I'm bringing this up and the reason I'm drawing distinctions here, right? And I know it's annoying, and I know you guys are annoyed about this, and I see the $10 super chat. I'll get to that in a second. But the reason I'm doing it, right, is because what frustrates me and why I'm picking on your tweet, Lactoid, right, is you're trying to make two things similar that I don't think are in any way similar. Again, there are commonalities, right, that you can draw, but they are so different in scale, scope, and what they were trying to do that I think it does not make sense to put them in the same bucket.
Great obfuscation.
Let me finish. What I'm referring to
remove Kamala from the ballot. Concede on that. You have to say no.
Which is more undemocratic?
I don't care. Is it undemocratic to remove Kamala Harris from the ballot?
I do, and I think
yes
people
or no?
should care.
Is it yes or no? There's still an answer whether or not you care.
Yes.
It's undemocratic. Why is it not then undemocratic to remove Jill Stein and RFK from the ballot when they were trying to do those?
I conceded that it is. But
you didn't, though.
No.
You literally said it's the same.
Are you not listening? I just went on this whole spiel that the reason that I am rejecting this flattening of a term is because it feels weird to use the terms with some things that are totally different in scope. There is a difference between making it a little harder by writing it in. That's not good, but it's different than after they have cast the vote to throw it the fuck out.
You're flattening the term
are these not different?
In the same
Which is worse, JebTan?
Which is worse, a campaign ad or
to make it so they have to write it in, or to once they do that to throw it out? Which is worse? Answer the question. Yes, sir. Which is worse? I answered your question about whether it's undemocratic. It's your turn, JebTan. It's your turn, buddy.
Wick.
Which is worse?
I'm waiting. You participated in the same flattening of the term when you said removing someone's name from the ballot is the same as putting out a campaign ad. Did you not? Yes or no?
I'm saying that they are the same in scope and concept.
That is flattening the term. You are willing to flatten the same term you're accusing us of flattening.
The ridiculousness of it. The ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous. You're flattening the term.
Again, you still haven't answered my question, though, and I'm gonna hold him to it. JebTan, which is worse? To make it so that
I'm not the one arguing based on we should be playing games about.
Are you refusing to answer the question?
Rejecting undemocratic.
Well, let it be known. JebTan refuses to answer the question, which is worse? Whether writing someone's name, he thinks it's the same. Writing someone's name.
I don't. Care about
so which is worse, motherfucker?
I care about them being undemocratic.
Okay.
You are asking me to.
I care about scale and scope.
Sandbox.
Nuance matters.
Where we have to decide.
Distinctions matter.
I agree. Nuance matters, right? But here's kind of what's happening. We're presenting the affirmative position here, which is that Democrats are a threat to democracy. And whenever we go to present a pillar of the argument or some evidence of the argument, which is it's not just one piece of evidence, it's a lot of different pieces that we're all putting together to make the claim that they are a threat to democracy. Every single time it's like, well, we put forward this. Well, is that really 100% equal to what Trump did? Maybe, maybe not. But we're not. That doesn't get us to where we're trying to go. I'm trying to simply establish that they are a threat to democracy, and then once we establish that, and then the discussion is who's a greater threat to democracy, and then we can see where the scale lies on this particular question. But the problem is we need to establish whether or not what they're doing is a threat to democracy in the first place. Absolutely, it is worse to take a name off a ballot as opposed to run an ad campaign. Specifically because ad campaigns are freedom of expression that private citizens and private organizations get to do, while primaries and ballots are pseudo-government exercises that is supported and funded by the U.S. government, in which people go in, and if candidates meet specific thresholds, which Jill Stein absolutely has, then you fill in, like, they get their name on the fucking ballot. And if you remove someone's name from the ballot, you are absolutely limiting their chances, and you're removing the advantage they get by having their name on the ballot in accordance with the rules. Jill Stein met those rules, and the DNC and their allies still sued to take her off the ballot anyway. So explain to me how it's not a threat to democracy when you have Democratic groups suing to remove Jill Stein, who qualified for the ballot, to remove her from the ballot when she qualified for the ballot. How's that not a threat? Obviously, it's a threat.
Are you familiar with the concept of triage? You have to deal with the things that need dealing with first, right? The biggest threats that you can take care of. If someone has a little cut on their finger, yes, it's bad and should be taken care of. We should look at that. But if someone's got a gushing neck wound, you take care of that first. You deal with that first.
Sure. Should the doctor even diagnose the cut on the finger at all?
Sure.
Sure, because that is an injury. Would you agree that the cut on the finger is an injury?
Yes, but we put that in perspective, and it would be foolish for the doctor to focus his attention on the cut on the finger rather than, and while ignoring the man with a gushing chest or a neck wound.
Now let's have a now. We've established that both of them are injuries. Now, maybe two doctors could have a disagreement as to, well, actually, you took a look at the finger.
No, you can't have a disagreement on which is worse.
I think you can. It's obviously what I'm doing. You got a cut in the finger, right? Oh, one doctor might say, actually, that looks infected. And in fact, that looks heavily infected. And there might be a problem, doctor. We should probably treat this. It's actually easier to treat this right now as opposed to wait and to treat this other thing that you're particularly concerned about. Well, actually, no, doctor. I think that this is worse, et cetera, et cetera.
Again, you guys refuse to answer this question. JebTan refused to answer this question. You've refused to this question. Which is worse? To make someone write their name on the ballot, let me finish. Or to, once they write it down, once they've cast their vote, whether it be to circle in the dot or thing, to take that vote and to cast it out.
Oh, obviously that's like a little bit worse.
A little bit worse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're
a little bit worse?
You know what? No, let's keep playing this game. I think the ultimate worseness is trying to pack the only check on the government's ability to restrict your right.
It's a check on democracy.
To restrict your right to protect your right to democracy. I think it is the worst threat to democracy of any party right now is the Democrats' attempt to pack the court specifically so that they can strip us of our own rights to protect our individual rights.
Well, hold on, 100%.
That's their stated reasoning for doing it. By the way, they admit they want to do it for that reason.
100%.
As somebody who has in the past actually supported packing the courts, I would say that there are better solutions than packing the courts to do exactly what we want to do and the reason why we want to do that.
Agreed.
And that's like adding term limits to the Supreme Court.
No, not at all. Making it a political body?
No, adding term limits.
Making it a political body.
I don't necessarily know if we should make it a political body because I don't necessarily know if we should be voting in who goes to the Supreme Court. I still think that it should be a appointed position, but I think there should be term limits.
Let me take a break to read the super chats. Thank you for the money, gang. Got to make a little money. Excuse me.
Yeah, no worries.
$10 from Artemis Fowl. Was Obama removing habeas corpus and jailing whistleblowers a threat to democracy? Are you simply construing democracy to just the mechanisms for voting? To me, that seems far too constrained. $5 from Rabid Wombat. Mere weeks ago, you were upset about every vote in the Democratic Party being thrown out and Kamala being acclaimed the candidate. And now, I'm still upset about it. It's still bad. I think that's worse. The worst thing the Democrats
is it a threat to democracy?
Yes. Absolutely. Artemis Fowl for $20. Well, Wick, maybe we can have a panel on comparisons to Trump next week, but this isn't what your stream is about. The stream is about Democrats, not Trump. Maybe you should change the title to compare it to Trump. So I'll answer that. I think that you can't look at something in a vacuum. You have to look at the context around which they're acting and how they're acting and why they're acting, right? And I think that informs us and can inform us and should inform us on how we act and how we vote and what we even focus on. So again, right, now that I've said my piece on the super chats, back to you guys, and I'll let you guys keep arguing. But I have more thoughts. I just don't want to monopolize this. But go ahead.
Yeah, when I say the political body thing, sorry, the term limits fundamentally make the Supreme Court a political body. And it's not because I understand you're saying total term limits. So you're saying they're not able to get reelected, which totally, that is the better way to do it. The issue is they can get promised jobs. They're going to get promised jobs now. They're going to get promised positions. They're going to get promised speaking gigs. They're going to get promised all these things that they no longer have to disclose, which they do under the current ethics code of the Supreme Court that they just adopted like last year, that everybody seems to ignore. Now they don't have to disclose any of those things because it has nothing to do with the fact that they're a Supreme Court justice, because it's only going to take place after they're a Supreme Court justice. So boom, they're now immune to any like violations of that ethics code because they can just perform them once they're no longer justices, and then they're not violations of a Supreme Court ethics code.
The Supreme Court ethics code that they just established is a little too broad in certain places, but there are certain. I don't necessarily think that they shouldn't be able to be put in. Like if another president wants to put them back in, I think it's more of like, I don't think the Supreme Court should be a lifetime appointment. I think there needs to be like, I would say like 8 to 10 years maybe. And then the seat opens up and somebody else gets appointed, or the same person can be appointed. That's what I mean when I say term limits.
Well, the specific Supreme Court stuff, we can go in the weeds another day on that. I want to.
Yeah. We can go in the weeds. The thing is, what you're proposing isn't going to actually destroy the functionality of the Supreme Court in the way that court packing would, right? Because if the court becomes like if there's court packing, then the court becomes a rubber stamp for whatever administration comes in next.
Well, that's why that was my point was like, we would both acknowledge that that court packing is bad. There are better ways to do it. There are better ways to handle the issue of the Supreme Court, one of which being just adding term limits.
Sure, I disagree.
Kamala Harris and Biden, both of them, have threatened to pack the courts. Kamala Harris, back in her primary run, she said she would do it. And Biden has said multiple times that he would do it. Now, this is actually relatively unpopular, and there's probably currently, thankfully, some political obstacles to that happening. But what I'm concerned about, especially in the case of, like, let's say, an overwhelming Democratic victory in the election coming up, that those political obstacles get removed, and then the court packing becomes an actual threat, right? And so, it is a threat to democracy. It is a threat to the functioning of the republic. Now, and then because somebody in your chat said something dumb, Wick, so I just have to clarify.
Are you arguing with chat? I'm here, motherfucker. You can argue with chat another day.
No, I'm not arguing with them. I'm just clarifying something here. As Wick already agreed, if you have a candidate, now Wick agrees when it comes to Kamala, but I would say generally, if you have a candidate that otherwise qualifies to have their name on the ballot, and you have a political organization that is utilizing lawfare to attempt to remove their name off the ballot, specifically to boost their polling numbers, specifically to remove voter choice in order to benefit their party, that this is a threat to democracy. If they also ban the throwaway of write-in ballots, then yes, this is worse for sure. But I want to point out how interesting it is that we're referring to the same party doing both, right? It wasn't the Republican establishment that was trying to get Trump off the ballot in Colorado.
Sued? What member? The person who sued in Colorado? What party were they a part of? Registered?
Yes. So I'm going to explain how lawsuits work for a second. It is absolutely possible for one political party to find.
Who was it?
Somebody.
Were they Republican or Democrat?
It was somebody who identified as a Republican.
Okay, so they're Republican.
It would be like
Trump off the ballot. Okay.
Sure, yeah, it'd be like if I lived in Pennsylvania and was a registered Democrat, and then I attempted to get Kamala off the ballot there. Yeah, would this be like a Democrat move, like a Democrat-funded, a Democrat-organized move to remove Kamala off the ballot in Pennsylvania? Of course not. Of course not. This is part of like the lawfare. Part of this is you find moles, you find people who you can use for your political means. Yes, for your political and legal means. This is how this works, okay? And so that's what they did in Colorado. And they did say, as you pointed out, that they're going to throw away the write-in ballots too. That was the Democrats and their allies, right? And they haven't changed because now they're trying to get Jill Stein off the ballot, despite the fact that she legally qualified.
Again, I don't approve of that, but there is a substantive difference between these things. And again, I want to draw the audience and both of yours attention to this, right? Like, we can address those things. Those are things we can work with. I'm happy to do so. But until we deal with the man who tried to throw out my vote, who tried to throw out my general election ballot, I voted in Pennsylvania. I voted for Biden in Pennsylvania. And Trump, again, tried through fraud and through violence to get my vote thrown away. And I take that personally.
What happened to your Biden vote?
Again, I took it personally too. But there's a substantive difference. There's a substantive difference between primaries and general elections.
What? Wait, why?
Well,
What? Like there is a literally substantive difference, but there's also a vast majority substantive similarity, which is that the person you voted for unilaterally does not get to get elected. You would agree that's at least 80%.
Because the primary isn't the election. I could still.
Primary is an election.
The primary is a election.
It's not the general election.
It is a government sanctioned election. Yes.
In fact, it eliminates more choice for you as a voter. It eliminates more choice for you as a voter than the general election.
You guys are doing it again. No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. Absolutely
if I get my vote thrown out during a primary, I still have another chance to vote in the general election. However, if I get my vote thrown out in the general election, yes, I can. I can still write them in. There's nothing.
If they manufacture a candidate,
hold on.
Nobody
do you think
that's
hold on, JebTan? If they throw out your vote in the general election, when do you get to vote again on the general election?
What do you mean? You don't get to vote again in the general, just like
of
you don't get to vote again in the primary.
Difference. Primary election is for run-up to the election that matters, which is the general election. Correct?
That's just a matter of timing.
The timing doesn't matter, right? Like
you still don't get to vote for your chosen candidate.
Yes, I do. Again. I could still vote in the general election for Biden if I so choose.
Wick. There's two votes we're talking about. I know there's two votes we're talking about, like the primary and the general. If you get your general vote taken away, then hey, at least I voted in the primary. If you get your primary taken away, then hey, at least I get to vote in the general. Like, I guess.
Who cares? Either way, your person you voted for can't be president.
The person that you voted for was undermined, right?
There's a there's a substantive difference here, because if my guy loses,
yes, one was successful, the other one wasn't. That's the substantive difference.
Yeah, one's more likely to happen, which is a thing which is a term,
because
which is
one
something
has
you're
less
flattening, as you say. Yeah, sure.
Because
but when we're talking about flattening,
why are there less protections
undemocraticness
and less rules and registrations and regulations for primaries? Right? Sorry, regulations for primaries than there are for general elections. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we have federal laws covering general elections, but we have significantly less? If not, I don't know if we have any regarding primary.
There are laws.
You have a lot of federal laws for primary elections. That's just
there's laws for both.
Which one do you think has more?
I don't know what.
I don't think number of laws matters. We have like one federal law covering. We have like one federal law covering murder. Does that mean we don't very strictly restrict murder on a federal level?
There's far more laws like involving like embezzlement than there is like homicide. But that
number of laws
could
be just as much a result of complexity as it could be seriousness. It's not a measure of how much we care or how much we regulate something. The number of laws, the severity and penalties might be a reasonable thing, but I'm pretty sure the severity and penalties of election interference are similar for both.
Also, severity and likelihood, I think, are two things that need to be factored in, and it's factored in whenever we're evaluating whether or not somebody is a threat, right? Like if somebody has like a 0.000 infinitely zero and then one like chance of killing you, like they're not really much of a threat, even though the severity there is death.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody has a 95% chance of punching you in the face, I think this person is a much greater
I'm just
threat.
Really curious.
And the substantive difference here is that Kamala is the candidate, despite the fact that she didn't win the primary.
And that's the important thing.
Eastman's theory didn't even get off the ground because Trump's own vice president said no.
And his own justices affirmed it. His own justices affirmed it later too.
Yeah, the whole thing crashed on stage one. right? Compared to Kamala, who is currently the candidate.
Because that's the issue.
And they are currently suing to keep Jill Stein off the ballot.
Yeah, the concept we're talking about, Wick, is you're frustrated about a flattening based on severity if successful. We're frustrated on a flattening based on the likelihood of success. You're pretending it's the same thing that happened with that bullshit Destiny AJW stuff that Pisco then basically, by the way he reamed Connor, proved AJW correct, which was they were kind of pretending the likelihood of the two things happening were similar, that the likelihood of Trump ending democracy was similar to the likelihood of Kamala basically getting elected. They acted as though there was a significant chance that Trump ends democracy, even temporarily, and there's not, because every single time he's attempted to do something, it's gotten absolutely fucking walloped by his own justices, his own cabinet members, his own vice president. Even the people around him will not let it happen. Whereas Kamala,
hold on,
party wants her
about
assault weapons
Let's
banned.
talk about that.
Her party wants her to pack the court. Her party wants Supreme Court justices forced in that will restrict our rights to the Second Amendment, which restricts our rights to democracy because we can't defend our own
just
right
said,
right.
There's a lot of bullshit that I have to deal with. Sorry, excuse me. So it's going to take a minute. So Lactoid just said, right, that thankfully, right, and I believe this I'm paraphrasing, but this is a quote. Thankfully, packing the Supreme Court has a lot of political obstacles right now. Those political obstacles are from the Democrats. To be clear, those political obstacles are from the
Republicans.
So you
There's
think?
one
Do you
party
think?
that
Hold
unanimously
on.
and it's
Why?
The Republicans.
Excuse me? Do you think the Democrats want to, all of us are dead set on packing the court? And if Kamala
I didn't say that doesn't unanimously want to pack the court. I said that unanimously doesn't want to pack the court.
And keep in mind, like the reason like why the Dems are concerned about packing the court is because the Republicans have threatened the nuclear option if that happens.
Yeah, the threatened
that as soon as they get into power,
as
soon as they get into power, if the Dems pack the court, and this is the thing, the Dems actually don't have like a principle against this, despite the fact the Republicans have said they won't do it, right? But the Dems don't have a principle against this. They're just concerned about what the Republican response might be. And the response would be exactly what the Dems would do, which is I'm going to appoint 20 justices that are just rubber stampers, and I'm going to pass whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah, they don't have any philosophical objection to it.
It's constitute. Well, even the justices they pick don't actually have like
they're mutually assured destruction. That's what it is. So again, to act as if one.
But Republicans had a principle against.
Yes, it's mutually assured destruction on one side. The Republicans aren't going to pack the court, and they haven't packed the court even when they're in power. Right? They're not going to expand the number of justices. They're not going to do it. And if they do it, and if they threaten to do it, hold on real quick. If they threaten to do it, then I will say that they are the bigger threat to democracy. If they threaten to do that.
So it's just the Supreme Court that you're concerned about. I'm more concerned
about
no. To be clear,
it's all of it. It's all of it. But the Supreme Court thing is
that's your main.
I agree.
That's your main.
It is the biggest slice of this big pie that makes the Democratic Party a threat to democracy. Yeah.
Okay. Once again, I understand that. I'm against court packing for a lot of the reasons you are, not 100%, but I've argued with you on your side against a lot of the stuff that's been proposed by some of the more
almost everything I've said thus far that I've called undemocratic, you have argued with them on my side before.
However,
which is wild that you're supporting the party that wants to do all of it.
No, because hold on. Because there comes to a foundational principle of which party tried to throw out my general election vote. That wasn't the Democrats. They, again, I don't like that they did it, but they did some fucky-wucky shit with the primary. I don't like it. I don't like how they did that. I think it's bad. I think that sets precedent that is going to bite us in the ass later. It definitely is. That said, that is infinitely less bad than having cast a general election ballot, having it accepted, and having it in the process of being certified, and then having a whole ass plan, a whole ass team built and decided to take the thing that I had already cast and to throw it out. That is a much bigger threat. And the people who said them, hold on, let me finish. Because JebTan, you made a point that the people stopped him from doing that. That is why he isn't having Mike Pence as his vice president anymore. That's why he chose a yes man. That is why he wants to get the ability to take all these regulatory agencies, right? It's in his Agenda 47. You can look it up, right? To take all these federal regulatory agencies and put them back under executive control, and to be able to fire and hire at will, willy-nilly. He wants to do that with thousands and thousands of federal employees because he wants to make sure that no one says no to him ever fucking again. So the next time he tries to do it, and he will try to do it, that he doesn't have those principled conservative Republicans, that he will be able to get a rubber stamp.
Chevron? Then why did they support removing Chevron?
Dude. Exactly.
Why, if what Trump wants to do, what the conservatives want to do, and the Republicans want to do, if they just want to like make sure the executives can do whatever they want, why did they get rid of Chevron? Arguably, the case that or support getting rid of Chevron. Arguably, the case that granted the executive the most power I can think of. That like in terms of a singular case.
This is the issue, right? Is when we talk about the issues of Trump, other Republicans are as much or more of an obstacle to Trump than the Democrats are. Other Republicans, Trump appointed justices. Hold on, stop. No, I didn't interrupt. You didn't. No, you didn't let me jump in.
You interrupt me all the time, but go ahead.
So, Republican justices or Trump appointed justices were many of the ones who shot down Trump's specious legal claims. Republicans stopped him from doing what he wanted to do largely during his presidency through legislation. A lot of the dumbest shit he wanted to do, Republicans are the ones to stop him. Republicans were a lot of the ones who challenged, Republicans or Republican lobbying groups are the ones who challenged his red flag laws and his aggressive use of executive power, right? They constantly get in his way. Republicans were the ones that wanted to get Chevron overturned. Conservative justices were the ones that overturned it. So when we're talking about the Republicans as a whole, and you focus solely on Trump, my issue is the rest of the Republicans.
Who's your party's nominee?
Stop. The rest of the Republicans negate Trump and get in his way, whereas all of the things we're saying that Kamala wants to do, take away our Second Amendment rights, blow up the demand side of the economy and make it so we're never able to buy a fucking house, also extend housing assistance to fucking illegal immigrants, are things that Democrats as a whole want to do. They want to support her in doing it. The likelihood of her doing her anti-democratic things or undemocratic things is far higher, 10 times higher than Trump's likelihood of being able to do his anti-democratic things.
Who's the Republican nominee right now?
Who is the head of the Republican Party right now? Everything I just said.
How many?
No, because hold on, JebTan, what you just said supports my argument. You understand that, right?
It doesn't. We get in the way of him.
Yes, because Republicans recognize that Trump is a bigger threat to democracy than the Democrats are. They recognize it too.
How many
the Republicans are not a bigger threat to democracy?
My argument is that Trump is the biggest threat to democracy.
Wick. How many panels have we had?
No, it's not. You just said Republicans.
How many panels have we had? How many panels have happened that just like rants about whether or not Trump is like a threat to democracy and how big of a threat to democracy he is?
Oh, we've had
what I think tons. Is tons, but we don't really have that many. We're talking about the shit the Dems do, and when I tweet about like the shit the Dems do.
We're talking about
here we are, and half the time we've talked about Trump.
Because you have to compare these things.
Half the time. I understand when it comes time to Trump, we're going to talk entirely about Trump, and then when it comes time to talk about the Dems, we got to talk about Trump too because we got to compare them, right? I understand.
Hold on. When we talk about Democrats, you have to compare it to the other side. When you talk about the Republicans, you have to compare it to Democrats. That's how it is. It's when you talk about men's issues, you have to talk about women too. When you talk about women's issues, you have to talk about men too because they are connected.
No, I literally brought up this exact same criticism when we had like the men's panel and people kept calling in and trying to make it about women. And I criticized this. I'm saying men can't even have a fucking panel talking about men's issues without it having to become about women too. When there's 100 panels about whether or not Trump is a threat to democracy, right? We're not talking about like this shit that we're talking about now, the things that I'm alleging the Dems are going to do. It's talking about Trump and the specifics of Trump's plan and the specifics of January 6th and et cetera, talking about that, okay? And then when I want to talk about the shit that the Dems have done, consistently done, have a history of doing, I mean, back in 2016, their primary was unfair. WikiLeaks came out with that, right? The superdelegate system, Tammy Baldwin in my state, she went ahead despite the fact that her state, despite the fact that the people in that state voted for Bernie Sanders, she said, "Fuck you, I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton anyway." And this was in 2016. Wow, we have like a history of the DNC.
Disagree.
Yes, right. Was undemocratic, right? And it is still undemocratic.
It's always been undemocratic.
It's
true.
The RNC doesn't have that though.
The primaries aren't as important.
Why does it?
As a general election.
Great. The RNC didn't have to deal with this. The RNC didn't have to deal with this because they didn't have the superdelegates and they didn't have all the weaponized planning against one of the candidates that did happen with Bernie Sanders in 2016. And then in 2024, here we come around. Biden won the fucking primary, and they still got rid of him. I mean, this is happening. This is a systemic problem here. Twice in my fucking adult lifetime.
Okay, you again. So I recognize it. Hold on, Vigilante, and I'll let you go. But yes, I concede primaries are undemocratic, especially on the Democrat DNC side. The DNC isn't a good organization for democracy when it comes to the primaries. I agree. Great. But that is far less important to me and far less serious of a matter than our general elections. I don't understand how you guys don't see this comparison again.
Sure.
Yes,
so one party is willing to go against their own nominee in protecting those elections, and the other party is willing to go along with their nominee's attempt to remove our ability to protect our rights to those elections, to remove our ability to understand honest things about our candidates, because apparently it's politics as usual to just paint every dude as a disgusting racist who wants slavery.
Yeah, there is no Democratic candidate that we would have. There's no Democratic candidate that we would have that we would put up that you wouldn't say is a threat to democracy. There's none. There's not a single fucking one.
Yes, there is. 100%.
Who?
Literally any Democrat that doesn't want to do.
You can't even give us a fucking name.
Because there are currently
you give us a fuck. You can't give us a fucking name. This is their thing. When we talk about threats to democracy, it does not matter who the Democratic candidate is. You will say they're a threat to democracy because they have a D next to their name.
So,
absolutely. Then give us a fucking name.
Wick,
give us a name. Give us a name.
Shut the fuck up. You are the
most
can't give us a
name.
Great. When you debate.
I'm glad that we have set that up.
I can
outline. You cannot
that if
name a single one that you don't think is a threat to democracy.
I'll let you flop as much as you want. Okay, so if a Democrat candidate came out, basically, if Joe Biden simply just said, because he already says he doesn't want to pack the court, he already said a number of other things. If he simply just said, I do not want to restrict the Second Amendment, he would not be a threat to democracy. That's the only anti-democratic policy position that he holds.
Do you think that gun control is a threat to democracy?
1,000%. Restricting our right to defend our rights is one of the most undemocratic things possible. Yes.
Are you stupid?
Why do you think we have a Second Amendment? Wait, can you actually tell me what the Second Amendment says? Just recite it for me.
Recite off the top of my head? I don't have it memorized.
Yep. It's necessary to securing a free state, right, is in that amendment, is it not? Our Constitution recognizes that restricting the Second Amendment is a threat to democracy.
So do you think red flag laws are a threat to democracy?
To securing a free
is red flag
state.
Laws a threat to democracy?
Yes.
A threat? Oh my God. Back it up.
It is not,
please.
As you said.
Who is less likely to vote now because of a red flag law? Hold on. Who is less likely to vote now because of a red flag law?
Should felons be able to vote, Vigilante?
Sure.
No, felons be able to own guns, but they be able to vote?
Felons should not be able to. Should not always be able to own guns. No.
Wick, I can give you an answer.
That's a good answer.
I don't know what a specific name, because I've been looking for Democrats that oppose packing the court. But I actually think that you, Wick, would be a pretty democratic.
I like
choice.
The flattery. You know what? I'll give you that flattery. I love it.
I'm serious. You know why? Here's why. So under every point that I've said, it would be a democratic. It would a candidate would not be a threat to democracy if they were not utilizing superdelegates to undermine primary elections, which you said was bad, so you wouldn't do that. That you wouldn't be filing lawsuits to keep people off ballots, which you said was bad, so you wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't be. You would be elected in a primary, so because you said that it was bad that this didn't happen with Kamala, so you would be elected in the primary. Okay, you're against packing the court, so you wouldn't be doing that. Okay. Right, you're against censorship and pressuring social media to censor people. So you'd be there, and you're against presumably you're against unfair lawfare. We can get into the details of that, but assuming that you
I hated what they did to Clinton during the 90s.
You are literally This is why I pointed out. If you want an example of what we expect when it comes to a not a threat to democracy. Honestly, it'd be you based on your positions on things. The problem is, here's the problem.
Flattery. Look, the flattery's working. I gotta tell you, it's working.
I'm sure. But here's the problem. Kamala and Joe Biden don't share your opinions. And the DNC doesn't share your beliefs, and they don't share the quality of person that you are, your convictions, right?
Yeah,
They
that's
are-
the
they-
issue. Is there
and so
are
what I would-
Democrats we could name. They're just not the ones you guys nominate because you guys allow them to play this game with your primary
and they
votes
don't control
and
the
with the
party.
media shit, and you allow them to make it so no one can get in unless they
I
agree
think-
with most of the Democratic platform, which includes massive gun control and other things like that that restrict our ability to protect our own rights.
Let me
to
read some of
democracy.
these.
I can
Let me
give
read
you-
some of these super chats after
can-
that, like suck fest, okay? And I
Okay.
appreciate it. My dick appreciates it. Thank you. But we're gonna read the super chats. I'm gonna pass it to Vigilante. Okay. Artemis Fowl for $5. The Democrats are threatening democracy in order to save it. Don't you see? Is this a commentary on the New York Times shadow campaign article? Thank you for the $5. $5 for TL1524. I'm curious what's worse, contesting votes with lawfare after elections or using lawfare to make sure your opposition doesn't make it to an election. So I think that the first one is worse. I think that throwing out a ballot already cast is worse than trying to stop someone from putting a ballot in the first place. Both are bad. But I think one is
Yep.
infinitely worse. $5 from Artemis Fowl. Pennsylvania violated its own constitution in order to do universal mail-in voting. Wick, does mob rule matter more than your constitution? I don't know the specifics of the constitution in Pennsylvania, but I think that if there is a law that makes it harder to vote for mail-in ballots and things like that, that's probably a bad law, and I would support overturning it. $5 from Soyaddle. Conservatives soying out about the party primary nomination process is just as pathetic as progressives crying about the Electoral College. Thank you for $5. $2 from Manny to the Max. How about we vote third party? We're going to have a panel on third party voters tomorrow, actually. It'll be fun. Tune in for that. $5 from Rizius. £5, I should say. Euros? Pounds? I don't know. In regards to packing the courts, doesn't blocking Obama pick of his justice count? And then $20 from Lawson Harrison. Hell no, we shouldn't be allowed guns or votes. And then $2 from my 2024 A Gay Odyssey. My January 6th super chat was censored. Well, thank you for the $2. But that is a question. Would you consider what Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans did to stop Obama from appointing his Supreme Court pick to be a threat to democracy? Curious.
That's a valid
Yeah.
question.
So the actual process, I think there's something there to criticize for sure.
So
now,
it
do I
was
think
a
it's
threat to
nearly-
democracy. They tried to stop democracy.
No,
Well,
actually, so hold on.
I'm gonna say why it's not in a second, because there's there's something substantive underlying this, which is that not all justices are equal. But
Well,
the
I've got a
actual-
different one.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the process has there's something there to criticize, right? Isn't the process nearly as dangerous as packing the court? Absolutely not. But and I've had this discussion with you before, right? There's different legal theories on how to approach law, right? And it's not necessarily political, right? I'm going to posit that any non-originalist justice doesn't believe in the rule of law, and so the Merrick Garland and Justice Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor, et cetera, these picks are not picked because of their adherence to the rule of law and their interest in maintaining the American Republic. They are picked because they're partisan hacks. They are picked specifically because they reject the idea of originalism, the idea that we should be looking at the law as it was written, as it was intended to apply. And they just simply want to use the Supreme Court to change the law into whatever fits their designs. Now, this is, I think, also a threat to the Republic and a threat to democracy. And so the question is, quite literally, I think Artemis Fowl said before, like, oh, we have to like do an undemocratic thing to like protect democracy. I don't know if that was the right thing to do in this case. That is what happened, but I don't know if that was the right thing to do in this case. Like, is stopping Hitler from winning the election, is that undemocratic? Maybe, but like, let's say it prevents America from descending into like a fascist dictatorship. I don't know. Like, it's
Sure.
a tough question.
You know
Well,
what?
hold on.
I'm fair with
give an
stopping
alternative.
Hitler from getting elected. I will throw
Yeah.
out someone who voted for Hitler. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
let
apply
me
that
give
policy.
an alternative explanation for
but
why
I
I
did-
democratic. I think it
Yeah,
was
then
democracy.
I want to give it
Sure.
to
Sure.
Vigilante directly after though. But go ahead.
I think it was democracy neutral, and here's why. I've got a quote from a loose quote from a guy I think we both have expressed respect for in this conversation. His name is Joseph Biden, and he said, "We'll just let democracy take its course. We're going to hold on to the Supreme Court pick because of our proximity to the election. We're just going to let the people vote, knowing that they have the power to vote somebody in who will get a Supreme Court justice that they want." So I think it's democracy neutral. because yes, you're intervening in the Republican Democratic structure of the Senate, but you are then throwing it to the Republican Democratic structure of the popular vote, or of the not popular vote, but Republican vote, right? Our electoral college. So that's why I don't think it's helping democracy in a vacuum, and I don't think it's hurting democracy in a vacuum. I think it's democracy neutral because, yes, you're sort of impeding the Senate, but you're impeding the Senate for the purpose of giving the people a chance to have a say, which is why I don't think
Would you
it's
throw out someone's vote
undemocratic.
that you thought would be worse for the country? Like, so if you were a
Wait, this has
poller,
nothing to do with that. That's such an aside.
Why?
This is what? This is
Why does
giving
that matter?
people the right to vote on it. This was
No, but
stopping the Senate from voting so that the people
if you
could
believe,
vote someone that would
let me
nominate
finish
someone
my
they like.
hypothetical before you say it's stupid. You believe, you
Sure.
100% believe that Kamala is a threat to democracy, that if she's elected, you're never going to have another free and fair election. She's going to substantively stop.
No, that's not our line. Hold on, that's not our line.
I'm giving you a hypothetical. I'm not saying it's your line, okay?
Oh,
I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm saying someone who really believes this, right? And they think that Kamala is going to pack the courts, take away everyone's guns, all that. You are a poller in a polling place, and you have a ballot box that you know, right? You've counted the votes. You know that 90% of them go to Kamala. You're in a swing state. It matters. Do you throw those out to protect the bigger democracy?
No. So for the same reason.
So why?
Hold on. Let me give because you might answer your second question with this one. For the same reason Lactoid and I are saying, right? While you're frustrated with the flattening on severity if successful, we're frustrated with the flattening based on likelihood of success. When I, the pollster, throw someone's vote away, 100% likelihood those votes do not count anymore. Whereas Kamala, the ethereal idea of Kamala, even if I believe it to be true, ending democracy is de facto less likely than my throwing away of their votes.
I agree. And the fact that Trump has already tried to do this is bigger to me than Kamala saying that she might do it when she gets elected.
She's tried doing it. She's the candidate right now. This happened. The threat's
when
been
did
realized.
they pack the courts?
Multiple of these threats have been
Well,
realized.
hold on. No. When did they pack the courts?
No. The fact that she's the candidate is what I'm saying.
Okay,
Like,
that's not what I'm referring
every
to.
single thing.
I'm saying
right?
that, just as JebTan said, that the thing that happened, like, definitely already happened, is bigger and more important than the ephemeral idea of what might be in the future, even if I really believe it. I'm pointing to that to show how, even in that, under those circumstances, Trump is worse, because Trump tried. Trump tried to do it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
We don't have to see about what he asked to do. He tried to do it. You saying that Kamala might do it?
No. Your logic. Hold on.
But she hasn't.
You're wrong. It's the wrong comparison. It's the wrong comparison. Like the court packing hasn't happened yet. That is the threat, okay, for sure. And the fact that they've said they're going to do it, that is like the threat.
Biden was president for 4 years. Did he do it?
No.
Okay.
But I understand, right? They're threatening to do it. I just said that they didn't do it. But you're saying, well, he tried to overturn the democracy,
did it.
right?
He took a plan and
he didn't do it. He tried to do it and it failed.
You just said he tried. Kamala Harris did it. Kamala Harris is currently the nominee. Now, I understand you're saying, well, the primaries are different than the general, whatever. Well, sure, you can say that, right? Now, Jeban,
so you're not talking about packing the courts in this instance?
Well, no, right, correct. We're not comparing packing the courts with January 6th.
Well, that's my point.
We're comparing January 6th with what happened with Kamala taking the power away from Joe Biden. That's what that's the comparison that's being made.
Well, and also,
I know that you're going to say the primary is different. I understand that, right?
Well, and I'm also talking about the other
you're
threats
giving it credit for.
I'm also talking about the other threats to democracy that we've already discussed, like the restriction of our gun rights. Like they have actively tried to do it. They've failed, but they've tried. They've actively tried to get Supreme Court justices on there that will attack those rights.
Yeah,
I reject the premise.
Reject
the premise that gun control is a threat to democracy.
Sure, you reject that premise. The founding fathers of this nation, the crafters of the Constitution, and the language of the Constitution itself all disagree with you. Necessary to securing a free state. That is necessary to securing the democracy. Sure, you live in a country that presumes their correctness, so I don't give a fuck. Honestly, like in this country, we assume the Second Amendment is necessary to securing a free state. We're a constitutional republic. That is a factual. That is
With their
a
muskets
de
and their
facto
cannons.
truth in our legal system.
They didn't.
That
They were not able to imagine modern day.
You're right. I
just
100%
weren't.
agree that we are even more capable of defending our rights now with the Second Amendment
If
than
the
we
state
ever
wanted
were in
to
history.
take you
because
out, they
of
would take
weapons
you out. There would be no
technology.
question.
So, first of all,
That's not true at all. Vietnam is a great
Absolutely.
example.
They can take you out in traffic in the middle of fucking Baghdad.
A bunch of
And
dudes
just
in fucking
you.
huts
No
with
one around
AK
you. They
a
could
bunch of
drop a
dudes in
samurai
fucking huts
drone,
with
a
sticks
samurai
and
missile on
pits.
you, and you would be gone, but
You're
you wouldn't
wrong.
even see them.
Okay.
You wouldn't
You're
even
wrong.
know they existed, and
You're
you would
wrong.
be dead.
Vietnam
You would be
proved
in
you're wrong.
pieces.
Vietnam proved you wrong.
Okay.
As a
So,
group, as a unified group, people with the right to defend themselves and regular old small arms and sticks and
Yeah.
pits defeated the U.S. military.
Here, so
You're wrong.
3 things. One, I'm going to give you an example of a Democrat that actually doesn't support gun bans, which is what you're talking about.
Sure.
And he's the senator. He's the senator from my state. It's Sherrod Brown. He's been in Congress for a very long time. Yes, he does support some minor gun regulations, but he does not support gun bans,
Sure.
which is what you were talking about. So 2, the primaries thing. Unfortunately, primaries are not federally regulated. The parties set their own rules for their own primaries. This is the issue with the primaries that we have. We could definitely probably all agree that the primaries need to have some sort of federal rules. That way,
I
the
don't know if
parties
they
are not
do,
setting their own-
actually.
I would say, I personally would say that they do, just because of I do tend to agree with Lactoid, like the superdelegates thing and stuff like that is pretty anti-democratic. Honestly, the shit that they pulled towards Bernie way back in 2016 was probably one of the things that pushed me toward previously being a fucking communist.
Well, this is a Destiny talking point. You're going to run into trouble here with this audience, buddy. They say that it was all kosher.
It was not kosher.
And third thing, so you guys have kind of been trying to build a bridge on a point that we all disagree on whether or not it is anti-democratic. So let me bring something to the table that I think we could all agree that is anti-democratic, that both sides do, and build the bridge that you two have been trying to build, and that is gerrymandering. Would you agree that gerrymandering is anti-democratic, especially under the definition that you proposed earlier, the second definition, Lactoid? Because gerrymandering, in my opinion, would fit under that second definition that you proposed.
I think gerrymandering would fit into the first better. Organizing or using a system to limit actual
enough.
voter options and establish legal but oligopoly control. Sure.
Yeah, and for me, it would depend on the manifestation of it, right? Because the issue with gerrymandering isn't like whether or not malicious gerrymandering is anti-democratic. It's whether or not the legitimate, like, should we take away the power to quote unquote gerrymander, which would also take the power to legitimately redistrict in instances where it makes a lot of sense.
Right. Like,
Well,
and this comes into issues. I think it was Alabama, right, that used AI, like used the computer to do it. So just cycled through like what makes the most sense, and that ran into some problems at this because of the Voter Rights Act, which I think is a problem. But so I think redistricting is fine. Yeah, redistricting is fine, but like I agree with you that like gerrymandering can be a threat. Sure.
Gerrymandering itself is anti-democratic, and that's kind of my point. There are ways to fix the issue. I would say what we're trying to get on the ballot here in Ohio, which is the Independent Redistricting Commission, that basically is exactly the same, almost exactly the same thing that California uses, where it's redrawn by citizens that are not actually in politics, is probably the best option that we have currently. But the act of gerrymandering in itself, whether you're doing it maliciously or not, is anti-democratic, and it's something that both parties do.
Well, so you think any sort of like redistricting based on populations is anti-democratic fundamentally? I disagree with that.
Well, and also vigilante, real quick, vigilante. I don't think we should call it undemocratic, because like that's like leveling things. Like what Trump did January 6th, like that's the only thing that should be called undemocratic. Everything else we got to use a different word for.
Well, it's it's weird to say that gerrymandering is undemocratic when you could be doing it in order to give people better representation.
That's my thing, right? Is like legitimate quote unquote
It's weird,
gerrymandering.
yeah.
Like if we're using gerrymandering
Well,
as a
that's not what-
catch-all for any sort of redistricting, I don't know that I agree that
No,
it's
but,
like
but,
for-
but, but he just said that we're not doing
Yeah.
that. Yeah, he just said that we're not
Okay.
using it.
So
that
it's
way.
only the
I'm
bad.
using the actual.
redistricting.
I'm not actually using the actual definition of gerrymandering, which is to redistrict for the purpose of giving your state the majority, your party the majority, which is something that both the Democrats and the Republicans do. There's a difference between actual redistricting and gerrymandering.
Sure. That I can agree with. Yeah, no, 100%.
And by the way, I'm uncomfortable like saying that what you just described, sure, that's a threat to democracy.
I don't. I think that's gerrymandering is a threat to democracy.
Solely for the
like,
ability
for example,
to
like a lot
get
of
your
people
party
will
to
say
win?
like voting ID is a threat to democracy, and I mean, no, not really.
I wouldn't say voter IDs as.
Wait. There's an argument to be had about that.
I know, but you're wrong, and I'm right.
Well, no, I think voter ID, you can argue that like the question is the intent here to secure an election, which is pro-democratic, or is it to like rig or disrupt an election, which could be anti-democratic, right? So there's an actual debate to be had, and a lot of people will argue that they are, a threat to democracy, and that's a conversation that we can have, right? I would agree with you that I don't think that voter ID laws are a threat to democracy based on what I think the actual interest is,
So,
and
I get what you're
the fact
saying.
that the fact that when states do require it, they're able to provide that for free.
Yeah.
But this is very different than saying, well, we can't call anything a threat to democracy because that makes it sound like it's similar to what Trump did, and what Trump did is on a whole different level. So we can't even use that phrase anymore to describe anything that Dems do or anything that anybody else
You can
does.
use it, and I agreed with you that certain things, the Dem crew, you can use it, but not everything that limits someone's ability to cast their vote is on that same level. It just isn't. Like a voter ID limits people's limits people's ability to vote to some extent, but it would be silly to say that in a vacuum that's undemocratic. Now, again, I would agree with you, and I would agree with both of you here, and I think I'd even agree with Vigilante, that you can use things that are otherwise fine, otherwise okay, and you can use them in a malicious manner to disrupt and these things. And I'm against that, right? I'm taking the brave stance that if you were trying to use a legitimate process in a malicious way in order to attack specific groups and keep them from voting, that's something we need to put a kibitz on, to put a
Kibosh.
to stop.
Yeah.
Okay. However, simply requiring voting ID to secure an election is fine. I don't think that's undemocratic. I don't think anyone would half a brain would call that undemocratic. But by Lactoid's definition, it's undemocratic.
No.
Yes,
hold
by
on.
your definition, it limits people's ability
I just got done saying that like an argument can be had, and I would make the argument that like securing an election is a pro-democratic endeavor, right? You're trying to make sure that the democratic process and the constitutional process is protected, right?
By that same logic, the Democrats are just trying to keep the biggest threat to democracy, Trump, off the ballot. So they're actually protecting democracy by doing this. It's bullshit logic.
Whoa. You can make that argument if you want. We can have that conversation. But okay, sure, you can say it's dumb, but if you're going to make that argument, I just need to hear, again, it's not necessarily wrong. Like I think that you're overestimating the threat that Trump poses. Obviously, it's not like it's not logically incorrect, but I would need to hear you say that, well, we need to subvert democracy in order to defeat Trump because Trump is the best, like the biggest threat to democracy. If you say that, 100%, I'm not going to challenge you on the logic of it.
Of course you're not, because now you have a great clip. Right?
I'm not going to say
that. It's a great clip, but it's not true. And I don't think we should do bad things just because the other side is bad. I disagree with a lot of people on this. I disagree with my party, unfortunately.
I know. This is why you should be the nominee and not Kamala Harris. I just got done saying this.
Look. Tap me, Democratic Party. I will, like, seriously, like, I'm the best candidate ever. But I think of the people that we have a chance in hell of winning, right? I think that when it comes to protecting democracy, I think Kamala is the choice here. I think that when it comes down to it, I know you guys complain a lot about me making these comparisons to Trump, but that's the choice we have today. That's the choice we have. We have two. We have Trump or we have Harris. That's it. Like, you could write third party if you'd like, right? You could cast a write-in for me if you'd like, but there's no way that's going to win. It's just mathematically impossible, statistically impossible. So by that logic, the duopoly, the dual party system, the fact that we only have Democrats and Republicans could be construed as a threat to democracy. I just don't think it is. I don't think that that's how people think of the term, and I don't think that's how we should use the term. Does that make sense?
I think people do think. I do think that people think of the things the Dems have been doing as undemocratic. I think that you have said that like the removal of Biden and putting in Kamala was undemocratic. I think this is obviously true. I think suing Jill Stein to get her off the ballot, the things that they try to do with RFK and Cornel West is also having issues with the DNC. The Republicans have intervened in a lot of these cases to defend them. You have Biden's administration pressuring Mark Zuckerberg. It just came out. Mark Zuckerberg said, like, we were pressured by the government to censor COVID information because the government wanted us to, right? There's a problem there when you have like an administration pressuring private social media to censor particular positions. People said this wasn't happening. Mark Zuckerberg said it was happening.
Yeah, no, we're going to cover that. We're going to cover that soon.
Yeah. So again, when you start combining like all these things people have a problem with and they're saying is undemocratic, and then when you put it all together, I think that it definitely meets the threshold to say that the Democrats are undemocratic or a threat to democracy, especially when you factor in this is part of an ongoing trend going back to really before 2016. But 2016 was like the other egregious example where the party elites were organizing against Bernie Sanders, and the superdelegates, despite the fact that the people in their area voted for him, they still voted for Hillary Clinton anyway. That's a major problem. And let's not pretend here for a second. When Trump got elected in 2016, like there wasn't calls. I don't think Biden made this call, so I'm not going to attribute this to him. But there were definitely calls from other Democrats to like, oh, the Electoral College, like you should switch your votes, change your votes. Like they protested at the Electoral College. When the people there were casting the ballots.
Yes, that was undemocratic. They should not have done that. The people who were asking the electoral delegates to go against the will of their state, yeah, absolutely, we're a problem. Okay, that was
sure. Yes, it is an issue, and this is the thing that like I'm frustrated about. Is like every single time I bring up one of these things, you very logically say, "Yeah, that's an issue," and so then at the end, when I tie it all up together and say, "Okay, isn't this enough for me to say?" I'm not necessarily forcing you to say that it's as big of a threat to democracy as Donald Trump, because I know you hate him, and the Democrats will like have this thing about him where he's the biggest threat. I understand that, okay, that you guys believe this, but you're saying it's not enough for me just to even call them a threat to democracy, or even hold the opinion that all of it together.
I'm not here to censor your
and with
opinion.
all this stuff. I'm not saying you're going to censor me, but I'm like, it's obviously logical, like the mental process that I'm going through. Like there's enough here that I can point to reasonable problems that I can point to.
But it's the issue I had, the reason I called you on today again, is it's like complaining about the guy who punched that kid, okay? When you have this guy with 2 machine guns just gunning down people left and right. Yes, the guy who punched the kid, bad guy. You probably should talk about it. But hey, let's deal with the machine gun toting maniac that's going on a rampage first. That's the issue.
Here's the issue: is
that's
more
why
like
we have this.
It's more like it's on a desert island.
You had this big thing where you complain when
yeah, but then you did it to me, so we threw that gauntlet up in the air because you said you
interrupted you because you interrupted me first. But
who's a bigger threat to interruption?
JebTan, absolutely.
No,
and he's even admitted this on that he fights for his, and I don't think that's a bad thing, to be clear. I don't knock him for it, but yeah. I am talking, and I'm going to finish my statement, that I think that the issue I have with your statements is the idea that these things are comparable, and I don't think they are. I think that, yes, we can have that discussion, and we should have that discussion, and I think we've had that discussion tonight, at least in part, about some of the things that the Democrats are doing that they should not do, that is wrong, that they should stop doing. However, we got this guy who has pretty clearly demonstrated that he is willing to take actions to throw my vote out, my general election vote, and that matters to me, and that's why I'm not going to be voting in Trump in 2024. That's just it.
So here's the issue: is we can think whatever we want to think, right? But the real equation here, and the thing we keep hammering on you guys over and over, is likelihood. It's not like you have a guy with a machine gun shooting people in the street versus someone punching someone in the face. It's you're on a desert island and you've got someone actively punching someone in the face, and then you've got a guy in the corner saying he's going to shoot a bunch of people with a machine gun, but he has no reasonable access to a machine gun. Everybody who he's asked to get a machine gun has told him, no, you're not getting a machine gun. Even his bestest buddies are all like, no, we're not going to help you do that, so why don't you just do normal shit instead? Whereas the other person is like, I'm going to punch someone in the face, and they have their entire crew behind them like, we're going to help this person punch people in the face. It's like, yes, one is less bad, but I know one of the people has the means and support and a big group of people who are going to do it along with them, whereas the other person is sort of on an island with the machine gun thing, but they're also really good at making fires.
It's weird how Republicans, and this isn't unique to you, it's just something that I've seen a lot, and the Democrats do it too with the other side, but it's weird how Republicans think that Democrats are these lockstep people. I guarantee you that we infight more than you could possibly imagine. So the idea that we're all lockstep behind Kamala Harris in every single position she has. When Kamala Harris came out with her price gouging protection act scheme, right, like that she had, it was leftist, Democratic, right, economists and others who came out against that, who said, that's probably a bad idea. They're the ones that are standing up against that kind of thing. When they tried to get rid of the filibuster, when Biden tried to get rid of the filibuster,
well, that's because
he
that was
couldn't
so
get rid of the
stupid.
filibuster.
Like,
why couldn't he get rid of the filibuster? Because Democrats stood up
afraid of
against
Republicans who were actually principled.
But they stopped him from doing that. So when you act as if the Democrats are all lockstep behind, Democrats in disarray is a meme for a reason, okay? It's a meme for a reason. The difference here.
The issue is that there are material people with power who got in Trump's way nonstop, whereas most of the issues that Kamala Harris is threatening democracy with, which is putting in living constitutional justices to attack the Second Amendment, single-handedly wanting to attack the Second Amendment herself, her entire party largely does support her on. They also, I'd find me a Democrat who doesn't want more living constitutionalist justices on the Supreme Court. Find me a Democrat who doesn't support some level of gun control and wouldn't support her having a complete MSR ban, which she has supported before and will probably support again in her assault weapons ban.
Having a justice that disagrees with you on how the Constitution should be interpreted isn't a threat to democracy.
Having a justice that strips the Second Amendment rights to protect our right to democracy is 100% a threat to democracy.
I disagree. But we
live in a country that
you're gonna
takes
say yes,
that
it is.
true.
I'm gonna say no, it's not. And
wait.
We live in a country that accepts it as true as a matter of law. So,
is there anything that Kamala Harris could do before the election that would make you vote Trump?
It would make me sit out. There's things she could do that would.
Is there something that can make you vote for Donald Trump specifically? Is there something
that Trump would have to do, and Kamala would have to do both. I don't see any realistic way that this would happen. Like I'm not holding my breath for it. But if Trump repented and said, "No, I was absolutely wrong. I've been looking to try to gain power, but I've realized the error of my ways. I'm going to change up my cabinet. I'm going to change up my approach. I'm going to change up my stances, and I'm no longer going to be seeking power just for me, and I'm instead going to be putting into the people." And then he proposed a lot of policies that I liked. And at the same time, Kamala decided, you know what? Fuck those Republicans. I'm going to put them in concentration camps. I'm going to go round them up. I'm going to Lactoid. I'm going to find you. I'm giving you an example. I'm sure I can think of more, right? Like I could. We're going to find JebTan and Lactoid, and I'm going to specifically, those two specifically, I'm going to come in and I'm going to arrest because I don't like what they said about me on Wick TV's panel, right?
Let's say.
Do you understand?
That,
yes, so there are things that both parties can do that would switch my vote. I just don't see any realistic chance of either one happening.
Here's a realistic chance. Here's a realistic chance. Let's say before the election, this I think would actually happen after the election, but let's just say it was beforehand somehow. Let's say she actually did it.
Zero fucks is like, wait, then I would support Kamala.
No. Let's say she would actually do like a live interview. I know, crazy. And let's say she said we've been talking it over, and as soon as when we get elected, we are going to pack the court, and we have legislation already out. We have the justices picked out, and then she names them, right? And then she says, if we get the support, if we win this election, we will do it. And that is a guaranteed, and then a leak that is literally,
I get
100% she's going to do it,
the hypothetical.
Right? Would this be enough for you to at least sit out the election? Or do you think that you would still vote for her?
I'd have to consider it. It might. It really depends. It might. If it was anyone other than Trump, absolutely 100%. Like, if it was anyone other than Trump, like if Nikki Haley was in the Republican nominee slot, right? Or if DeSantis was in the Republican nominee slot, then yes, I would actually switch my vote at that point. But, and again, people call this Trump derangement syndrome. I don't think it is. I think it's just honestly viewing his character and his actions and taking that into account, that if Trump... Yeah, if Trump wasn't on the ballot, then yes. But here's the thing about packing the courts and things like this. This is something that they threaten, but it's much like when George W. Bush threatened to make abortion illegal. He said that to get elected to play to certain positions. I never really believed him. A lot of people never really believed him. And in fact, a lot of Republicans have felt disillusioned because they felt that this is just something Republican politicians said. I think that the packing the courts thing is just something they say to
worst
to
example
appease,
though, because
to
then
appease
that
the
actually
shills,
happened.
to appease the shills like Pondering Politics,
Wait,
who gives
wait,
me
wait,
$10 to say,
Oh,
before
go
you
ahead.
end the stream, ask JebTan where he stands on Trump immunity. Also, did John Adams and Jefferson threaten democracy when they changed the size of the court before and after the election?
Yes, like
Are
it is
you
a
asking me that,
it is
or
a
are you-
oversight. It is a oversight of the Constitution that a hard limit is not put in there. It is a problem. It is a flaw, and it can allow for the destruction of the republic very easily. It's a problem.
Sure. So are you actually asking me those questions, or just acknowledging
I'll
that
just ask
you wanted you
JebTan
to?
where he stands on Trump immunity. I'm curious.
Sure. So Trump's immunity is reinforcing something that I think even Democrats told me before, which is that presidents generally have immunity of their official actions. Josiah and Destiny are fucking deranged on what they believe Trump immunity does in terms of making him a god king above reproach with ultimate power. It doesn't add any power. It doesn't give the president more power to do things. It just makes it just affirms what we already were pretty certain existed. And a good example I'd love them to chew on is name me one situation where it is easier to criminally convict somebody than it is to sue them. We, in every form of law, have a higher burden for criminal conviction than we do for civil liability. But for some reason, they think with the president, that's flipped. They accept that he's immune to civil liability. There is no standard high enough for him to be held civilly liable. But there's a lower standard for criminal conviction. Doesn't make any sense. Our entire legal system is built on the idea that criminal convictions are harder to get than civil liability. And so when the Supreme Court justices are looking it over, I was not surprised at all that they found that the president, who we already know is immune to civil liability, is also, for the same official acts, immune to criminal conviction.
Okay, Josiah, I hope that answered your question. Fair enough, but I'm not, here's the thing about these things. I got opinions, but I'm not a lawyer. So keep these opinions, again, in the context that they're given. So I hesitate to weigh in on this too hard. So
I am. And I
honestly,
read their whole case, and I took
won't
notes.
weigh in on it too hard. I don't like it from a conceptual level, but I don't know enough about the law to really give my opinion too strong. So there you go.
Sure.
It was written by Robert, so it's tough to understand. He's not the best at writing. I'm sorry. Alito's much better.
Fair enough. But
Fair.
okay. I think I want to give Vigilante the floor more. I feel like I've talked over you, buddy. I'm really sorry. Yes, okay.
No, you're good.
So go ahead, Vigilante. You had some stuff. So give the stuff.
All right, so I'll address one of the things that you guys both kept saying earlier, and it was referring back to the Trump stuff. So I'll focus more on the Trump stuff because that's kind of where my thought process was going into this, anyways. You guys, neither of you really see anything at all where Trump could become a genuine threat to democracy in any way, shape, or form, even if he becomes elected.
I think they're both threats.
Yeah, I think they're both threats.
I think they are both there. They're both current threats. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he certainly could and is a threat. I just think the same way that you guys are balancing potential severity if successful, I am balancing likelihood of success. And likelihood of success matters more, right? Because severity doesn't matter if something doesn't happen. And Kamala is so drastically more likely to implement the anti-democratic things that she wants to implement than Trump is. She has so much more support. Her entire party is supportive of her on the things that I am mainly talking about, which is living constitutionalist justices and whatchamacallit, massive gun control, massive executive power, right? That was one of the big issues with the border bill, was it basically said, President, you are now basically ultimate dictator of the border. And so I just think it's way more likely that she gets things out of hand in the next 4 years than Trump does. I think Trump, my favorite thing, I'm not voting for Trump. My favorite thing about a Trump
Who are
win
you voting
is
for?
the fact that he won't be able to run again. I'm not voting for anybody for president.
Okay, so you're sitting it out. We're actually going to
Yeah,
have a show tomorrow on non-voters and double haters and third parties. So if you guys are interested in that, tune in.
Yeah, my issue is that the Democrats have such a profound lack of principle that regarding like using policy as more of a carrot on a stick for election than actually to better the United States, that they will just infinitely throw free money at people nonstop every election to make it easier for
Oh,
them to
no, not
implement the
free money.
anti-democratic things they want to do.
So horrible.
So
Yes,
I also
subsidizing the demand side of an overheated economy that desperately needs supply side intervention is 100% horrible. It's going to be catastrophic to the economy. If I was in a swing state, after Kamala announced the
They're
four
talking, they
policies she
want to
announced,
deregulate on a
I would
federal
have-
level zoning
I
laws.
would-
You know that, right?
No. They do not want to deregulate zoning laws.
That's what they
want.
keep saying.
No. They want
That's
to
their policy
force
position.
They want to force states to comply with federal mandates on their zoning laws. That is not deregulating zoning laws. They want
It's
to
getting
strip
rid of a
power
lot of the
from
red
the states
tape
to
to
handle
build.
their stripping states
Stripping,
of the
sorry.
power to handle their own zoning
Stripping
laws is
states
not
the power to
deregulating.
keep homes from being built when otherwise they should.
Sure. And
Like,
you can
that's a good thing.
incentivize states to do it. She doesn't want to do that. She wants to throw free money at voters so that she can get elected over and over again, because she'll keep throwing free money
on, that's
into it.
not
Prices
true.
will continue to skyrocket. The problem will never get solved because we're already building, by the way. The building is already being taken care of. Building as a source of new homes has skyrocketed. It's at record highs. The issue is sellers can't sell their homes because rates won't go down. And if you subsidize the demand side of the economy, the rates will never go down. There are two ways we have to control the money supply: fiscal policy and monetary policy. One side of that, fiscal policy, is the president and the legislature's job, and they refuse to stop fucking spending. I said this when Biden passed $6 trillion worth of spending bills at the beginning of his administration. So the Fed has to sit here and say, cool, we have to continue to not raise rates, even though we plan to, or not lower rates, even though we plan to 3 times this year, because the government will not fucking stop overheating the demand side of the economy. And so we'll never get prices down, and they'll keep throwing free money saying, guys, we're doing all we can. And they can keep doing that so that they can get through the anti-democratic stuff they want, which is massive subsidization of illegal immigrants, massive attacks on the Second Amendment, and eventually cramming the court full of living constitutionalists who want to rip apart the Constitution.
Okay, $10 from Pondering Politics, and he DM'd me this because it wouldn't go through on Discord, so or on Super Chats. So thank you for
it's
$10.
got a bad word.
Please get an slur, censored, F slur, N slur. I mean, you don't know. He could say this. No one can
I'm
prove
only
it.
2
Anyway,
or 3 of those slurs. I'll have you know.
let's get to what he actually said. Please get an answer about the Adams-Jefferson example when they each changed the size of the court before and after the 1800 election. Did they threaten democracy? Didn't hear JebTan or Lactoid answer it, but I
just said
thought
yes.
Lactoid
He said it
answered
really,
it.
yeah. He said it really directly. He said it's probably it was an oversight
was a
in the
threat to
Constitution
democracy.
to not have a limit.
And I will. I'll even bring up another example, which is FDR. FDR, he didn't even succeed, but he sort of succeeded just through the threat, right?
Yeah.
Without actually packing the court, he was able to compel the Supreme Court into alignment with his policies, especially in the early part. And then as time went on, he was able to put in just the political hacks that he did to get a lot of Supreme Court decisions that were favorable to his policy agenda. And arguably, I don't even know if it's arguable at this point, one of the worst Supreme Court justices, or one of the worst Supreme Courts of all time, right? This is the court that brought us Korematsu, which put Japanese people in camps. This was the court that brought us Japlinsky, where if you call a cop a fascist, you get punched in the face. Well, you kind of deserve it because hey, them is fighting words, right? And then and you know Filburn, right, where all of a sudden interstate commerce means everything, right, including things entirely within one state because it affects the price everywhere, right? And you see a trend of the court just giving whatever it wants to the federal government because of FDR's power in that case, leading to, I think, a lot of problematic things and a disruption to, I think, an essential constitutional process. I am concerned when you have people who are openly stating that they want to do it. And look,
we do need a We do need a backing the court panel at some point specifically. But he said he had one more point in this.
One more point. Unlike JebTan, I am going to vote right now.
Well, I'm going to vote, just not for president.
Me. Okay, well, I'm going to vote for president, right? And it's going to be between Chase Oliver and Donald Trump, right? It's probably going to be Donald Trump, just to be clear, leaning towards that at this point. But if you don't live in a swing state, vote Chase Oliver. Definitely don't waste your vote on one of the two parties. If you don't live in a swing state, go ahead and vote for third parties so you can get them up to 5% so they can participate in different things. It's really important, trust me. Mm-hmm. But I have my line in the sand. If Trump announces that he's not going to pick Supreme Court justices off of the Federalist Society shortlist, or he said he's going to pack the court. If he does either of those, there's no chance in hell I'm voting for him. It's over, right? And in fact, I will be actively railing against him on Twitter until the fucking election and afterwards. Okay, if he does either of those two things. The problem is the Dems fulfill both of these problems, right? They're picking. No, they're not picking off the Federalist Society. They're shortlist. They're picking like the worst justices. And they're threatening to pack the court. So they represent, I think, an evil, a threat that is greater than Donald Trump at this point. And this is what I meant when I'm saying they are a threat to democracy. They are a threat.
Disagree on the severity of packing the court. I think it's bad, but I think what Trump did and will do is worse. And it's a severity argument. One more thing to his super chat though. It says, tell JebTan that he and or Lactoid are free to reach out to hash out their disagreements with me and or Destiny on Trump immunity. So that's an invitation to you. If you guys need a host, I'll host it. But anyway,
I was gonna say, I'm not really the one to reach out. I don't reach out to people who are, respect to Josiah's platform.
I can.
You don't want to reach out to people who are called not calling, but would clap and cheer if they found out you died. I don't know.
No, it's not even that. Honestly, for me, it's just from a clout perspective, it feels clout sharky to go to Josiah and Destiny and just be like, why don't you argue with me for a little bit?
I'll do it. I'll clout shark the fuck out of it. Puttering politics again for $10 more. For $10 more. Also, did the GOP threaten democracy with Garland in 2016 or ACB in 2020? That gave
we
them
talked about that. But,
6-3 conservative supermajority. Why is that better than
Amy Coney Barrett? They're saying because they treated Amy Coney Barrett differently than Merrick Garland because she was closer to the election than Garland was. And like I said, it's democracy. I think it's democracy neutral. Because you're taking power from one aspect of Republican democracy, which is the Senate, and then you're giving it to another aspect of Republican democracy, which is the vote, right? Like, if they were like, we're usurping the Senate and we're just going to supplant our guys' Supreme Court next time, then that would be not democracy neutral. But they're literally saying, we're not going to confirm them right now. We're going to wait until the people vote. So
I've criticized. I don't know. I don't like that line of thought, JebTan, because under that line of thought, just to be real, you could argue that, packing the court just moves the power from the court into the hands of the executive. I have a problem with that.
But that's a whole different balance of powers, right? Whereas the election is meant to decide who is going to dictate the judicial branch, but it is still a legislative power. So we're taking the power from the legislature and we're not moving it to another branch of government. We're just saying the legislature will have to decide on this after the people get a chance to revote on the legislature. Whereas the packing the court is literally taking power from the judiciary and putting it into the hands of the legislature / the executive.
Maybe I do criticize the actual thing, the process of what occurred.
I have a stronger criticism than Lactoid. But
sure, and I think the reason why you're gonna have a stronger criticism is because you don't hold the same opinion that I do about non-originalist justices not believing in the rule of law, and so I think that the calculations not as one-sided as you probably think, but I do think there's legitimate criticisms to be levied against the process that they went through when it came to Merrick Garland. And that was something that I didn't really defend the Republicans all too much on, because I think there's valid criticisms there for sure.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's neutral in terms of it's neutral whether it was a good or bad thing to do. I'm just saying it's
I think it's
neutral in
created a
terms of being a
precedent.
threat to democracy.
So the reason why I think it's a pretty strong threat is because of the precedent it sets. Much like I think that getting rid of the filibuster would set a precedent that would be harmful in the future. Not just the fact that I think the filibuster and the right to speak out and to discuss a bill is important. It's important, but it's not as important as the precedent of why the Senate exists and what the filibuster means to be able to limit the majority's power in at least some form or another. The filibuster is a tool, and like any tool, it could be used for good or evil. And I think that getting rid of that tool because we want to force through our agenda is just going to bite us in the ass later. And much like what I think that Mitch McConnell did with the refusal to seat Merrick Garland is, again, precedent. It's overturning the regular way of doing things. Again, it's legal to do. He didn't do anything illegal here, right? But he did something in such a way that was malicious in order to keep the people who voted for Obama from getting to allow him to appoint the justice that he wanted. They used lawfare, okay, in order to stop a democratically elected president from appointing the justice that he wanted. And that is just as bad as court packing. Just as bad. And the fact that you have one, if you have a problem with one and not the other, I think is a problem. It's not maybe.
Well, it can't be just as bad because like one is temporally limited, right? Like one can only happen in very specific circumstances, and it's limited. You can't you're not going to do this with the entire court. But with court packing, let's say I come into power and I'm going to pack the court. I could put 20 justices, completely shift the court entirely to just be my sycophants. Like Lactoids, before we know it, it's going to be unconstitutional.
Sure, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Fair enough. Fair point. You actually right on this one. But it is still pretty fucking bad. And it's not democratically neutral whatsoever. It was absolutely a shot across the bow of people's right to appoint or to pick a president that would appoint the justices that they felt would best represent them. You might not like the justices. They're not on their Federalist short list. They're not on...
Well, they are a threat to democracy, those justices, which is the complexity of what yes, I think they are. And that's the complexity of what I'm dealing with here. They are through the democratic processes, they are putting in people who will unravel the democratic processes. That's a tough question.
Well, we have kind of circled the drain on this. Vigilante, keep going. Sorry, again, I keep interrupting you.
No, you're good.
Elbow your way in.
So you guys were basically saying that you don't necessarily think that there's any way that Trump could successfully subvert democracy. Like it's not.
No, we both said he's a threat to democracy.
Well, you're saying that it's more likely that Harris could do it through packing the courts or anything like that.
She's already done it to a substantial degree when it comes to becoming the candidate without winning an election. So there's a precedent there. But go ahead.
So there are certain things that are within the ability of the president that most people tend to forget when we have this conversation. That I think it's significantly more likely that Trump would be to try to abuse than most Democrats would even try to use in general, unless it's an actual emergency, like martial law. So when we talk about, when Trump has sat here and made comments like he wants to be a dictator for a day, sat here and makes comments about how the immigration, the stuff happening at the border is an immigration crisis, and he wants to be able to just immediately deport all of them. The only way that he would be able to do that is through declaring martial law.
He said he's going to initiate the largest deportation operation in
Yeah, he
history.
didn't say he wants to deport
That
all of them.
wouldn't necessitate martial law. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he specifically say that he's going to exempt like certain groups of illegal immigrants? Like if
He
they
said he only specifically said he's going to mass deport violent criminals and then criminals.
Who decides who's a criminal? Anyway, €5 from Rizius. Rizius?
the law does.
The banning of, well, Trump is the law in his mind. The banning of Garland, more or less, led to the Dems wanting to pack the court. No, it seems more like karma if they do pack the court.
Sure, then I can say anything Trump does is karma, because every time we had a nice guy that went up there and was respectful and lashed out at extremists in his party and lashed out at extremists in their rallies, Democrats called him a racist, misogynist, homophobe, said he wanted to put black people back in chains, and said that no Republicans will never be able to nominate somebody who doesn't hate blacks, women, or gays. So yeah, I guess if we're just going by the karma rule, then the Democrats are the reason why America deserves Trump.
Well, by the way, I want to put out this is like a great also like line of thought too. It's like, well, they can't be a threat. It's karma. It's like, well, you know, like gang. This is like gang warfare mentality. Well, you got one of us, so we're gonna come get one of you.
Yeah, like I hate that line of thinking. That's why I bring up the Trump thing, is because Trump is the ultimate devil to them. And it's like, under that same logic, it's your guys' fault that Trump got elected, because Trump was a response. Trump was a response to Democrat narratives. It's blatant. Democrats even admitted it.
Trump wasn't just a response to Democrat narratives. I've talked about this before. Trump is a response to the establishment, or what people viewed as the establishment. The George W. Bush, as well as the Obama. And it came out as a direct result, I think, of the 2008 bank bailouts that were given. I think we can draw a direct connection to Trump's rise and him taking over that kind of energy that was building, the populist energy, because of how the bank bailouts were handled. And I think that basically there's a Venn diagram of overlap with Trump voters and Bernie voters, for example. And both the people who fall under that overlap are people who want to burn down the system. And I think Trump was a Molotov cocktail thrown into the system. They want it destroyed. They want it burnt down. They don't like our American system. They don't like the establishment, quote unquote, and they want to see it destroyed. And I think that is where a large portion of Trump's initial support came from. But that's neither here nor there.
I mean, if you look at what people liked about Trump, it was how he talked and how he wasn't afraid to say the things that Republicans should get to say and Democrats shouldn't be able to. It was a lot. I don't think it was as much about the 2008 bank bailouts. I think it was, otherwise Trump would have risen and beaten Obama, but he didn't. I think it was largely because Republicans and conservatives and then normal people in the middle were tired of being abused by a government that when they argue with it, the government will just call them racist and fascist and anti-poor or whatever else they want to call them, to basically say, we set the narrative for what dictates being for the poor, being for black people. And it's all bullshit narrative. It's all just dog shit economic policy, but we're going to say it's racist to hate it. And so people were like, fuck it. We need a guy who's willing to be called racist. We need a guy who's willing to be called misogynist. And so they got a guy who's kind of racist, kind of misogynist. Not homophobic. I don't think there's any evidence he's homophobic. But they got a guy who, because if you're selecting for someone who's willing to be called all those things, you're likely to select somebody who is some of those things, and unabashedly so.
So, well, I'm going to nitpick with you. I think the reason that Trump ran in the first place is because he got insulted during the press conference dinner. Obama threw a jab that way, and I think Trump took that personally, and it sent him on a path.
That may have been the tipping point for him.
Yeah,
sure.
Sent him on the path, right? Yeah. So the fact that Trump would have risen up to challenge Obama if it was because of the bank ballots. I would point to the Tea Party and how the 2010 midterm elections was a huge loss for Obama.
But I think Cruz would have been your candidate if it was solely
energy.
The other
Trump
stuff.
Took it. Trump basically stole that energy and made himself kind of the flagship and the person, right? Because Trump doesn't look. Trump is the current head of the Republican Party, but he is not a Republican. Let's be real. Trump is Trump. Yeah. Trump is his own thing, and he has basically skinned the Republican Party and is wearing it as a suit right now. And yeah, that is a problem.
Yeah.
That is a problem going forward, and it's going to be a problem for a long time. I don't think. I know a lot of people think, well, if Trump just lost the election again, and then we'd never hear from him again, and everything would go back to normal. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that once Trump goes away, we've already opened this box. We've already showed the success of this style of thing, and I think that's going to be a continuous problem going forward for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen candidates show up that are Trump-like Vivek.
Yeah, and he got fucking laughed out of the election. He didn't even have a hope or a prayer.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
because
the
they did have
GOP
the
is
fucking
moving.
charisma.
The GOP is. I don't think charisma was a problem for him at all. I think the GOP is genuinely moving away from that because they got what they wanted out of it, and they don't want it anymore because there's a lot of bad shit that comes with having Trump as your president. I think the GOP is generally moving away from that, and I think it should be naturally allowed to. I think the Nikki Haley beating out Ron DeSantis in the primaries is a pretty good example of like they're not just looking for the Trumpiest person ever. Vivek was like the worst, one of the worst polling candidates. Ron DeSantis basically did nothing but stagnate or get lower, and he's not even that Trumpy. Nikki Haley was one of the two vocal anti-Trump candidates during the primaries, and she skyrocketed in support.
And
So it's like
now look at her, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Kissing the ring. Embarrassing.
I don't think it's kissing the ring. I think it's if you have genuine conservative principles and you see all the things Kamala's promising to do, you have two options, which is you can be principled in the very isolated sense of you're not going to support a candidate you don't like, which is what your job is to do as a voter, or as someone with an actual power and platform, it's likely that your conservative principles for conservative policy would lead you to supporting Trump on that level because you can't afford to have happen what will happen under Kamala in terms of policy and like pretty irreversible damage to democracy. Not just democracy, because I don't think the biggest issue with Kamala is that she's a threat to democracy. I still think her general threat to democracy is mid to low, but her threat to conservative policy objectives and our vision for the country and how we think poor people will have a better shot, people of different colors will have a better shot in general.
I would actually argue that Trump is still a bigger threat to conservative policies and what being a conservative means. I think Trump has damaged that in a way that Democrats never could. Democrats have always been kind of the enemy. But when you are able to basically hijack an entire party and turn it into my way or the highway. Look at what they did to poor David French. Are you guys familiar with David French? Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He was like the original Never Trumper.
Yeah. Look what
I
they
liked
did
him
to
quite
that
a
man.
bit.
They made a picture of Trump pulling the lever on his African daughter in a gas chamber, right? Gassing his African daughter.
Who did this?
Yeah, that wasn't like the Republican establishment.
That was
though.
yeah, that was MAGA. That was the MAGAts.
Yeah, that was a bunch
Okay?
of fucking psychos, which I disagree
psychos.
with, and
Yes,
I don't like them
because you guys
one
are
bit.
principled, right? But this is this is the wave that Trump has been riding, and it's a problem. Just as I would point. I'm going to both sides this a little bit. The Democrats have a problem when they listen to their lefty stuffs, but thank God Kamala has been kicking Hassan out of the DNC.
Wait.
Oh,
I got a concern. I got a concern for you, Wick. Are you concerned at all that 1 in 3 Biden supporters think that the Trump shooting was staged?
Yes, that's crazy. That's
Biden
crazy.
supporters, not the lefties. 1 in 3 Biden supporters think that the shooting was staged.
Conspiratorial thinking on all sides of the aisle right now is a fucking problem. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I 100%
and I do
agree.
think I will say I'm pretty sure I have heard you discuss that in the past.
I kicked someone off my panel the night it happened who said it.
Yeah.
Right? And it takes a lot for me to kick you off the panel, okay? It takes a lot. But when, again, body's not even cold. Someone had literally died. And they're like, no, this is all fake. It was all show. I was like, no, I can't do it. I'm not going to ban you or anything, but I'm not going to let you talk at that point in time.
Yeah.
Okay. I love you
Fair
all.
enough.
Vigilante, keep going. We keep interrupting you. You got to be more assertive, dude. You got to be more assertive. You got to just get in there. And then we're going to wrap it up after you're done. Go.
Yeah. So on what you were talking about a second ago, Jeb, I would agree with Wick that Trump is probably a bigger threat to conservative values than Kamala is, because like Trump is the embracement of the regressive side of the Republican Party, and whereas conservative values aren't inherently regressive, they're obviously more about conserving the way that things already are. And a lot of the things that Trump wants to do is yeet shit back in time. Like the fucking getting rid of the Department of Education.
Sure. And I mean, I don't know that eating shit back in time and in some of those regards is necessarily bad. The Department of Education, I think, could be shrunk instead of removed. But things like the ATF, probably I wouldn't mind them being completely dissolved and their purview thrown under the FBI and not allowing them to actually set the policy for what is illegal, because it's ridiculous and it's 90% of the reason Chevron needed to get overturned. The issue with I have an issue with what Wick said about Trump being more of a threat to conservative policy. While Trump did do some very
conservatism, to be clear, but go ahead.
I don't think that either. I think the Trump presidency was largely good for conservatism in a couple of ways.
Well, no.
Primarily, one was
No, let him make his argument. I'm curious.
How good the economy was under Trump, whether you give him credit for it or not, got a lot of people kind to voting for another Republican after him. It got more people kind to voting for him. If it wasn't him, I think any Republican in this election would have a landslide victory after the economy they had under Trump versus the economy under Biden. He moderated the Republican Party in a lot of ways. People call him an extremist, which he is an extremist in terms of like his own personal interest. But I mean, he single-handedly got the GOP to remove a federal abortion ban from their platform, to remove pretty much any mention of LGBTQ plus anything outside of specifically education. Gay marriage, is off. Like, he moderated the Republican Party's policies quite a bit and libertarianized them in other ways, and which is, you could call more extreme for sure, but I still think is a good thing. As far as like politically, Donald Trump is a very moderate Republican, and he did some good things for the Republican Party. He was less of a war hawk. He created the value of isolationism, at least in terms of conflict within the Republican Party, which was something that George Bush did a lot to take away from Republicans and small government conservatives. He basically threw small government conservatives out of the conversation when it came to war. And now we're back in it. So I think for conservatism, he wasn't necessarily much of a danger at all. I think, and he deregulated massively while he was president.
And
isolationism is not a conservative thing. Reagan, again, wasn't an isolationist.
Reagan doesn't define conservative.
Kind of defining conservatives for a generation. Do you disagree?
I mean, yeah, but that you could then argue that Donald Trump is the defining person for conservatism in this generation.
Which do you think is a better?
I'm saying they're both wrong. I'm saying conservatism has an objective definition, and it's small government restricting the power of government. And I think you can quibble about the exact lines of what that means, but I think isolationism being firmly outside of the scope of a small government conservative is not a foregone conclusion. And for me, it's good for conservatives personally to not be fully isolationist, but to be generally respectful of a longer and more tedious evaluation process of going into international conflict.
How that plays out in practice, however, is a problem. I want to point out also something you said about how one of the reasons you think that Trump has been good for conservatism is he got the economy was good and he got more people willing to vote for a Republican. I think that is one of the threats, actually, and allow me to explain, because he has watered down what it means to be conservatism, and people now consider themselves conservatives who aren't in any way, shape, or form. They couldn't even define it to you. They couldn't even tell you what that meant. All they know
that doesn't
is
matter.
they
I
want.
don't care.
No, that is important when it comes to. Look, gatekeeping is good when it comes to certain things, and when it comes to protecting like what something is, to keep a definition of a thing pure in some ways. Like, I don't like it when
Like Scott does.
Huh?
Scott, right? According to him, I'm a socialist. Just to be clear,
okay, Scott,
libertarianism is very strongly gatekept by some people within the Libertarian Party.
He's an
I
anarchist.
don't know enough about Scott's position
Doesn't count.
to really talk. I know that Scott has some dumb opinions, but I can't speak to this specifically. But I think that,
this is a disagreement I have with him.
he's an
I don't like gatekeeping. Actually, I disagree with you on this pretty strongly.
oh,
Yeah, no,
fair
I
enough.
think coalition building is good because here's the thing, right?
For
we can-
politically, yes, it's to win elections.
Yeah.
Coalition building is great, but when it comes to having your ideology and transferring your ideology, it has some downsides.
Yeah, but when I
Humanities,
look at
man.
the Republican Party politically, the only downside I would see from inviting people to call themselves conservative that aren't, right? The only potential downfall to
Well,
that
that's
is
not
that
the
you
only-
might
that's
move the
the
party
beginning of my
into a
argument.
direction that's
You
less
haven't even I
conservative.
haven't even gotten to the meat of the potatoes, right? That's the
okay,
opening
good.
salvo, if you will. So if we're gonna go this point by point, it's gonna be hard to actually make my point, right? The thing is, he's replaced what conservative, and this is the second part of it, right? Is he's replaced what conservative was and what it meant to be a conservative, right? The Reagan era. Generally, you can argue whether that or not Reagan was a good of academic conservatism. You can argue that. That's fine. That's not what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is that Reagan era conservatism was a better force than Trump era conservatism. Do you disagree?
Well, are you saying just Trump's policies or like what the conservative party, the GOP, looks like right now?
What Trump has made it into and is currently shaping it into.
Well, so that's the thing, is your hypothetical version of what Trump is going to doom the party to, I have no idea because it doesn't exist. The party right now has produced two of my favorite presidential candidates of my entire lifetime. They're generally over fighting on stupid cultural shit like a federal abortion ban or gay marriage, and they're more focused on things like protecting gun rights and getting justices in that are going to protect the Constitution. They are a little bit more focused on deregulation than they used to be. Donald Trump deregulated fucking very heavily. They're harder on crime. So I think the way the Conservative Party is right now, take a snapshot. Outside of Trump being the leader of it, right, and the optics of that, politics-wise, I look at the GOP platform right now, I like it. I like it better than it was in the Reagan era. Largely.
Really? What?
The Reagan era had a lot of attacks on like individual liberties. Reagan was the one who wanted to argue that black people shouldn't have the right to bear arms, essentially.
And then you also had, like, I mean, look at the change in the war on drugs, right? I mean, you have Reagan.
I'm not a hero worshiper.
Nancy Reagan's out there saying, just say no. And then you have Trump in 2018 signing the Farm Bill, which is like for all of the audience, like people who like, Delta 8 carts, Trump was the one who made that happen.
Yeah, and the reason why people like Reagan isn't because he was the perfect picture of conservatism. It was for a lot of the reasons I'm talking about with Trump, whereas he made conservatism super consumable and popular, and he moved the country in a conservative angle that it wasn't moving prior, but that doesn't mean that he and his policy goals were the end stage of conservatism. I think that he moved it in a drastically more conservative direction than it was before, which was good. I think Trump has not done that. He hasn't moved it more conservative. What he's done is cut the fat of federal policy objectives among conservatives that have distracted us from going after the good, juicy stuff, like gun rights and lowering taxes and lowering regulation. We've been focusing on fucking abortion and fucking gay marriage and stupid shit like that my entire life. And I'm so done with us wasting time on shit like that when our guns were being stripped away up until these Supreme Court justices did what they did. Our rights to carry guns are being stripped away. Like, there were a lot of
you see Wick, because he's a man, he doesn't really want to care about the abortion topic. Statistically speaking, he fits that graph that I posted earlier.
Like, I care a little bit, but I'm like, I don't want federal. We argued in my entire lifetime that it was a states' rights issue, and in the moment that Roe v. Wade got overturned, you had little psychos trying to make it a federal issue, and Donald Trump single-handedly clapped that down. By the way, the majority of the party was going to try to push for that, and Donald Trump said, "Nope. It's off the platform." And they were like, "But we're the majority of the party. We want it on the platform." He's like, "No, it's not on the platform. If you want me to have the GOP platform," he made a deal. He said, "I will replace Agenda 47 with the GOP platform if you do these things to the GOP platform. And mind you, likely the reason Nikki Haley supported him, because what was her biggest win in a debate was her telling all the other Republicans on the stage that arguing for a federal abortion ban was a waste of fucking time.
Here's the thing. If he thought he could win by banning abortion federally, Trump would do it in a heartbeat. If he thought he could win. The only reason
in a heartbeat?
Yes. Yes.
Got him.
And the only reason that he does anything is to win. But go ahead, Vigilante. I interrupted you too much.
No, you're good. Jeb, I would say you're right to an extent. So I would agree that Trump made regular Republicans more palatable, but it's not for the reason that you think. It's because him and his base are so fucking psychotic that you guys look normal.
I guess I think it honestly, if you look at moderates, it's more just they vote on when did they feel the best, when did they feel like things were going the best, and they felt like things were going the best under Trump. We had a hot economy, we had low interest rates, we had massive deregulation, kind of clearing the way for those things to continue. We had supply side intervention in the government, leading to a sustained growth. Because you can argue that Obama he teed it up for Trump. Obama laughed at Trump when he said he was going to get 4% GDP growth year over year. He laughed at him. He said, nice fucking pipe dream, pal. And then, a year and a half in, we had 4% year over year GDP growth. Because the Democrats have been hamstrung by their reliance on demand side intervention, giving free money to people in order to win elections, that they could never lead to a runway for growth.
What was
like
pre-COVID? What was Trump's federal budget?
Trump's federal budget was too big. He overspent.
4.9 fucking trillion.
Yeah,
that's way more than Obama. Almost double.
Yeah, no, 100%.
When we talk about
that,
inflation,
that was one of the bad things.
How's that been for inflation?
It was also less. It was also less.
Very much inflation.
It was.
Are you serious?
Hold on. It was
inflation
less.
was not bad under Trump.
Hold on. It was less. It was less than the predicted budget of any of the Democratic nominees in 2016. So.
Because you got to remember, we had like Elizabeth Warren. We had like Elizabeth Warren going for Medicare for all. Yeah, a lot of them were jumping on the Medicare for all train that year.
Kamala's was really high.
Well, Kamala was a joke of a politician, and everybody agreed with that before she became the Democrat nominee because she missed the most votes and was a do-nothing bitch the whole time she was in the Senate.
Third most votes. Yeah, third most votes, and like by far the most left wing. She basically just showed up, voted whatever the left wing proposition was, and then went home.
She was the left-wing extremist that Wick wanted out of the party, the people who wouldn't contribute in any way unless they got their very left-wing policy objectives. Look, she literally would not vote.
Least likely, according to GovTrack, to work on bipartisan bills. Least likely.
Yep. And she's seen as the successor to Biden, who people pride on his bipartisan legislation.
Her candidacy. I didn't want her to be the candidate, but here we are. And so I have to make that choice. I have to make that call.
And you didn't even get the chance to vote against her, Wick. Oh my god!
What an injustice!
That is awful. What an injustice! What
That's
the
difference.
Threat to
That's
democracy.
the difference. I
what
still
a threat
can't.
to democracy.
If Trump wins, or if Trump loses, if Trump loses, as he lost in 2020, I do worry whether or not my vote will actually count. I do. I'm genuinely concerned. I'm genuinely concerned that he is done enough to replace the people who told him no last time, that they will not be an obstacle this time. The guardrails.
The judges were the ones that were obstacles. None of them are gone.
It wasn't just the judges.
The judges were the ones who had the final say.
Was the linchpin. Also, the electoral, what was his position? The state elector guy in Georgia? Those were
how's he going to run again?
Two linchpins.
Yeah, he's not going to run again, dude.
Is he going to run past his 8 years, you think?
Trump?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Oh, Wick, come on.
Do you think
that's a Supreme Court issue?
This is the problem. This is the problem, right? For all the crazy MAGA people that you can identify. Okay, first of all, you guys have your crazies too. 1/3 of Biden supporters think that the whole thing was staged. Crazy. But like, I think RFK in his speech, like he mentioned, like Biden was mentioned twice during the RNC, or it was like twice, like some crazy low number. But Trump was mentioned like what like over 100 times or something. Like
sure,
like
Trump's a huge, much bigger threat than Biden was. I agree.
I think that like the derangement that is demonstrated.
Why is that derangement?
I'll get there. The derangement that's demonstrated is like I think relatively equivalent to like the fanaticism that some of his supporters show for him. There are people, I think, that like look at him. Oh yeah, he's going to run past the 8 years. Oh, he's going to be a dictator. He said for one day, and then dictators one day. In fact, I'm getting fucking ads right now where it's like a dictator for a day is a dictator for life. These motherfuckers are saying that he's going to become dictator of America. Like, oh, Brett, like Stalin. Like we're going to have fucking Stalin 2.0. We have been through a Trump presidency, okay? Like, sorry, like this kind of TDS fanaticism.
The world is worse for it.
We have to vote Kamala because is it one of the best Supreme Courts in history we have currently? We have relatively moderate like Bill Clinton-esque economic programs like deregulation and the tax cuts, etc. I mean,
also when the Russian invasion happened, all NATO countries had higher contributions to their military budgets by that time because Trump threatened to leave.
There's that too. And he got the ball rolling on getting out of Afghanistan.
You know why? One of the reasons that the Ukraine invaded, Russia invaded Ukraine and what has been fucking around in Ukraine since
because
about
Trump told him to.
Yeah, I bet there's going to be no proof of what you're about to say.
Not because Trump told him to. See, this is a problem I have with you guys. You make shit up. I don't even say anything. I haven't even fucking finished my sentence, but you have decided what I am going to say. And you have stopped to listen. I think you've turned your brain off. Because we're talking about derangement syndrome. No, this is important, right? We're talking about derangement syndrome. I hate that term. Is it derangement syndrome to, you have Charles Manson derangement syndrome. Oh, pointing out what he's done. You must have Charles Manson derangement syndrome. What the fuck are you talking about? I think it's okay to have real big problems with what Charles Manson did, right? I have real big problems with what Trump did and what he's going to try to do. It's not derangement to point that out. Am I the one who's saying that he's going to destroy America? Am I the one that's saying he's going to make sure that there's never a free or fair election again? Have I said that once on this panel? No, but you keep saying that I'm the most deranged.
You should run. I just said you should run. I'm saying that there's a problem. I didn't specify you having TDS. I do think the fact that we're 2 hours and 19 minutes into a topic about how the Dems are a threat to democracy when the only response is ever Trump. I think that's like a little bit problematic.
That's not the only response I've given. I've addressed your point.
That has been the number one response. Okay, you're better than most. I agree. You're better than most. I've said this already. Okay. But it is absolutely true that there is a derangement against him occurring among Democrats generally. This is absolutely the case. He is the boogeyman. He's going to be dictator for life.
Same with thinking that Kamala's going to take all our guns.
I don't think Kamala's going to take all of our guns. But she definitely does want to take away a bunch of them.
There are people right now we can find that think Kamala's going to go in and
sporting rifles. I don't think she was going to take away handguns or shotguns. I don't think she wants to do that either. But Wick, what you're about to say, I want you to finish because if you want to talk about why Russia invaded Ukraine.
Okay, why Russia was in Ukraine, I'll finish that. It's because, again, as H.R. McMaster wrote in his book recently, one of Trump's foreign policy advisors, to be clear, Putin led that man around by the nose, okay? He led that man by the nose. One of the reasons that Putin felt like he could get away with what he did was because Trump wasn't going to meaningfully oppose him. And
why didn't he do it when Trump was president then? Why would he wait till Biden was president to do something he thought Trump would let him do?
Military buildup, getting the logistics in place, getting.
He was using military equipment from the 80s. That should have been.
I got a better question. If that's the case, hold on, wait. Here's the better question. If that's the case, why was Trump the first one, to arm Ukraine with lethal weapons when Obama refused to? Obama refused.
That's a point in Trump's favor. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't near to the amount that it needed to be.
How is he? No.
Are you saying that if your argument is Obama was worse on Ukraine? Fair.
Hold on. So wait. Is Trump being led around by the nose by Putin?
According to McMaster.
More than Obama
This is a quote from H.R. McMaster, who is Trump's.
And you obviously brought up, I understand, and you obviously brought it up because H.R. McMaster's got to sell a book. I get that. But what I'm asking you is, if Donald Trump sold lethal weapons,
we're using evidence. Higher on the evidence hierarchy is actual, tangible actions we can prove. Trump not only armed Ukraine with lethal weapons.
Who do you think?
He also said, hold on. He also threatened to leave NATO
Trump's foreign policy. The guy who was in the room when he was making the decisions.
We're not. No.
Increased NATO funding. Or the guy that was in the room
provided lethal weapons to Ukraine. He did both
Wick,
of those things.
Wick, we are citing evidence. You're not arguing me or McMaster. You're arguing the evidence of McMaster, and the evidence shows
Yes,
Trump
the evidence
armed
where
with
he was in
lethal
the room
weapons,
and he
said,
do
I will. He
put that
expended political
higher
capital
than
to say to
rando
force
YouTubers,
NATO
yes.
countries to increase their contributions at the threat of America leaving. Why would he say the only way I'll stay in NATO is if you increase your military contributions to this for this treaty that is specifically to protect against Russia that Russia hates? He wanted more funding for the program.
You were saying that, look, they increased their funding. It must be because of Trump's threat. Trump said all sorts of shit. No one took him seriously.
Sure, who cares? Say they didn't take him seriously.
That is not strong evidence at all.
No, but
the stronger evidence. No, stop. Because the stronger evidence, the man who's in the room, who saw what happened, the direct witness, right? What you are doing is you're giving talking points. That you
I'm not giving talking
Twitter.
points. I'm giving evidence, and you're
That's
flailing.
You're saying something that
You're
McMaster
spurting
said.
out, dude. You're having a meltdown. You're having a stroke right now.
I'm giving you evidence, and you
You're just
McMaster
is obviously wrong. He must be wrong because how would the president
be wrong because then it would cause cognitive dissonance if you're right.
No. How could it be that the president? How could it be that the president that's being led around by Putin by the nose apparently? Arm Ukraine with lethal weapons, which Obama refused to do, and push NATO to increase their funding from the other countries. Here's my question: in what way does that benefit Putin? In any way, a stronger NATO, lethal weapons in Ukraine.
It's what Trump did. It's what he refused to do and did not take seriously. It is very possible that another president could have taken the Ukraine situation a lot more seriously. Did Obama take it as seriously as he needed to? No, he did not. He failed on Ukraine.
No,
absolutely.
He was being led around by the nose by Putin for sure.
Yeah. Maybe.
Here, the evidence shows what Trump said.
We have direct evidence from someone who was in the room, not someone who read it off Twitter, not someone who's on a panel show and making their pundit.
Not somebody who can look at the numbers.
We also have direct evidence that
this is such pussy shit. Oh, just because you read studies and you're citing actual
studies and evidence, you said that.
We watched it happen. Trump said if NATO does not increase their military contributions, which Putin does not want, Putin did not tell Trump to get NATO to increase their contributions. Whether you think they actually did it because of him or not, a man.
It also rained. It rained in France when he said that. Oh my God! God King Trump
who is being pulled around by the nose by Putin would never tell NATO to increase their contributions. He would never do that if Putin was telling him what to do. Why would Putin tell him to tell NATO to increase their contributions?
To cause a rift? To cause a rift between America and NATO and to divide that. That was the attempt.
How'd that work out? The only practical outcome was NATO was better funded when Russia attacked Ukraine.
Do you think that Trump is going, like Trump won't still continue to rail against NATO to cause strife within NATO?
The only practical outcome was increased funding in NATO. I'm not.
You're ignoring a lot of evidence here, right? You're ignoring a lot of actually things that happen.
Your evidence is.
You keep flailing about. You keep interrupting me because you know if you allow me to speak, I'll just destroy you. So you keep having to talk over to me. You keep actually shouting and yelling whenever I try to make a point that I have to shout and yell. Because all you have to do is you have to say, "Look, he said a thing, and then a thing happened," as if there's any correlation whatever between these things. There's no possible way that my limited brain could imagine a situation where Putin would actually ask Trump in order or pressure Trump or try to manipulate Trump into starting a fight in NATO. I don't see that how it could benefit him at all. I have no imagination whatsoever.
It didn't benefit him all.
There's not imagination. This is a direct quote from someone who was in the room who said this. Now you can say he's lying.
This is a direct.
That's possible. But let's look at all the different foreign. Let's look at all the different foreign.
A direct impact was the only direct impact was NATO was better funded when Russia attacked.
That is
only
not
practical impact.
Also, McMaster.
That was the only practical.
The only direct impact. Why do you keep
what
saying
rift existed between the U.S. and NATO at that time?
There is a huge rift. As leaders of NATO, as people who were leaders of the countries that worked in NATO, ask them about how they felt
practically what was affected in the Ukraine response by this rift in NATO that existed. Did NATO and the U.S. not immediately coalesce with all this increased funding and better military budgets to send weapons to Ukraine?
Look at, you just mentioned earlier about how Trump
no longer the president.
Introduced isolationism.
So the only practical outcome was better funding for NATO when Russia
Hold on, do you think Republican isolationism has helped or hurt Ukraine? What's a practical?
The only practical outcome has been better funding for Ukraine consistently. Republicans allowed Ukraine funding
Republicans blocked Ukraine funding for months.
They literally allowed it to have its own
They
vote.
blocked it for months, which allowed Russia. We're talking about material gains. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Russia, the fact that we weren't able to get those weapons deals in place in the timely manner had allowed Russia to run roughshod over Ukraine more than they would have done otherwise. So, sir, if you're asking
Mr. knows
me,
it all.
if you're
What
asking
exactly,
me
yeah, no,
what
so
practical
what exactly
impact
did
Trump has had on the Ukraine-Russia
Trump didn't have it.
conflict,
That was not Trump
that
at
was
all.
absolutely
That
a
was not
direct.
Trump at all. Trump was not in power.
Oh, you
Trump
think
was on
that
his
Trump
couch.
didn't have anything to do with that? The leader of your
Trump
fucking
was on
party?
his couch.
No,
He's
no,
not
no,
the leader of the party.
Wait,
He's the
hold on,
absolute leader of the Republican Party.
Mike Johnson was the leader of the Republican Party at that time.
Trump absolutely, like, again, the changes that he did was absolutely like antithetical to what Russia wanted, right?
Yes.
Now, I actually do agree that we probably should treat the Ukraine situation as more complicated than what we're currently treating it, of just like, oh, Ukraine best, Russia bad, funnel guns into Ukraine forever, keep the war going forever. I think there are some practical considerations. I think there are some financial considerations, and there's some ethical considerations with doing that. And honestly, I would like to see a peace made, and based on the proposals that I've seen from the Republican side, it does seem that a peace would be more likely if it's made clear to the Ukrainians that they're going to have to come to the table. And there's going to have to be peace treaty made. I think that will actually lead
Ukrainians
to a
are
lasting peace.
balls deep in Russia right now, doing their thing. Okay.
Oh, come on.
I think
Come on.
Yeah.
they're incredible.
No,
Let's
I
not be
agree with
unrealistic.
Wick here. Ukraine has seen gains largely because of American cooperation and better funding in NATO. Like, I mean, it's just this rift has not provided this massive detriment to Ukraine at all. To act as though any measurement of funds towards Ukraine is a result of Trump's NATO policy in 2019 and 2018. The only practical outcome of Trump's policy toward NATO in 2019 is that NATO had increased funding. You can argue that wasn't his fault, then fine. At worst, he was neutral.
Trump lost. The only reason for that is because Trump lost.
That's
the
not
entire
true.
time.
Not at all.
No, because the entire
He was the one who
time
armed
when
them
the-
initially.
no, when the-
Every sign says he
when
would have
Russia-
helped Ukraine too. Every single
What?
sign shows that.
Do
He
you
was
not-
the first
do
one to
you
give them
not
lethal
remember
weapons
the
during
fact
his
that-
presidency.
Do you not remember the fact that during the entirety of the initial parts of the invasion, he was railing against giving Ukraine weapons?
When Joe Biden was in office, all he did was give Ukraine weapons and increase funding in NATO. We're talking about what he did when he was president. He increased funding in NATO. He gave Ukraine weapons. Everything he did during his time as
So this is from
president
June 16th.
showed that he would
This
have
is from June
supported
16th in Politico. This
Ukraine.
is reported in Political EU. Trump threatens to cut US aid to Ukraine quickly if he's reelected.
Yeah, are we talking about the upcoming election, or are we talking about what Trump did when he was president? Because we can change the conversation, but you have to concede to me that everything that Donald Trump did during his last
I don't need to
presidency
concede shit,
benefited
dude. I think
Ukraine.
that,
No, I
again,
know,
we can
because
look
you're not
because
looking
what
to
he
have an
said.
honest conversation.
Why would
No,
he
the
fund it
only
then but
reason-
not fund it now?
I don't know. Maybe his position's changed. Maybe he thinks we've already given enough funding.
How many billions of dollars are we into this? How many lives? How many people have been blown to smithereens? I mean, just go on fucking Telegram. You can see like the most horrific shit ever. This is going to keep going until like
It also
there is
just
a
has
stop.
nothing to do with whether or not his policies as president, when he was president, benefited Ukraine or not. I refuse to allow you to completely change the
Donald Trump
conversation
fought against giving
because
Ukraine
you
aid.
were losing the
Hold on.
conversation
He's fought
to
against
change it to
giving
be
Ukraine.
about
You
something
claim
else.
that he was good for Ukraine. He is not.
Yes.
He's not been good
No,
for
no,
Ukraine.
I
He's
claim
fought
that his
against giving aid to
presidency was
Ukraine.
good for Ukraine, and it was. You have not given me an
Despite
argument
it,
against
It was
that.
at least better than
The
Obama's.
only
It was at least better than
The
Obama's.
only reason for that is because when the invasion ended up actually happening, he was no longer the one in office.
No. I
He
just
wouldn't
told you
have
the reason for
fucking-
that. Because there was increased NATO contributions and Ukraine had lethal weapons that Trump gave them that they didn't have before. That's why it was better under Trump. Again, give me an argument, not about after he was president, not about when he's president next. Give me an argument about what he did when he was president, that his presidency was not good for Ukraine.
When we look at how someone behaves, right, it's good to take into account what they actually say that they're going to do and the reasons that they say they're going to do it. And we can look at someone in a holistic
wait.
manner to
Like
look
pack
at
the
how
court?
they've done these things, right? So when we
No,
look
that
at,
doesn't count.
Again, it doesn't. Wait, what? It doesn't count? What Trump's saying?
No, I'm
I
saying
don't want to.
you're
I'm going to
packing-
cut off
when,
Ukraine.
When
aid to
Kamala talks about
Ukraine.
packing the court, it doesn't count. But when Trump talks about something, again, I'm just going to fast forward through all I'm about to say. It's not an argument as to how his presidency when he was president was bad for Ukraine. I can already tell. I can predict that right now calling my shot. It's not going to be about whether Donald Trump's presidency when he was president was practically good or bad for Ukraine, because you already know it was good. All the evidence that we've presented says it was good, and your only evidence against that is what will he do next?
McMaster's statement, which was what you're arguing with, was that Trump was led around by the nose by Putin.
Yes, and we have evidence that he wasn't. Where is your evidence that he was?
Two things. I keep giving you that evidence. First
no,
of all,
a testimony does not beat actual evidence.
Was McMaster.
Russia clearly did not tell him to get NATO to increase their contributions, and Russia did not tell you. He did not tell Trump to give weapons to Ukraine.
Witnesses of an event are actually evidence.
So did Trump? They're not better evidence than actual fucking evidence. There's something called an evidence hierarchy.
Again, while you're saying a thing happened while Trump existed,
this would not be admissible evidence. By the way, just to be clear,
no,
you can't have a fact witness go up and say he was being led around by the nose by Putin. No, you can testify as to like what specifically happened and what specifically was said. Like if it's we're talking about a statement by Trump, right? Because admission by party opponent is the only way that'd be allowed. Otherwise, it'd be hearsay.
Oh well, why was Trump impeached one of those times? What was he doing? I think it did regard Ukraine as well, didn't it?
Yeah, phone call with Ukraine
to coerce Ukraine into.
It was like getting more. That allegation was he was going to give more weapons or whatever if he was able to get information.
Yeah, it was potentially giving him more.
Again,
aid
the idea that Trump has been good
and
for
the aid
Ukraine
went there
just isn't true, because he says, "I will stop funding Ukraine." That's what he said.
Well, now, yeah.
The Trump presidency that already happened.
And when he was president,
argument
he got
that one was not good for Ukraine.
He got impeached. Or they tried to impeach him because he wanted to threaten with Ukraine and coerce Ukraine into doing his way, or he wouldn't.
What happened with that aid that they were saying he was withholding? No. What happened with that aid?
What about it?
What about it?
Yeah,
you sound like you're.
You said you know.
You definitely didn't get this talking.
No.
You got this talking point from chat. Had no fucking clue what you're talking about.
Chat.
So
okay,
now I will tell you what happened. So
hold on. No, you made a claim. Which chatter said it?
Which chatter? Never happened.
Which
but the aid went through.
No,
the
which
lethal weapons
said
we
it?
gave
You're just
Ukraine
making shit up again.
Went through.
You're making
Trump
shit up
only
again, JebTan.
Practically did fine. You were talking out of your ass all by yourself. Congratulations. You're a big boy liar. Anyway, the aid
Wait,
that
you're
Trump
the one
that just fucking lied about these things.
I'll just wait. The aid for Ukraine went through. The investigation that Trump apparently was going to withhold the aid if it didn't happen. So clearly he didn't withhold that aid. He gave lethal weapons and Obama didn't. He set new precedents for helping Ukraine. He set new precedents for America's stance on NATO, which is increase your fucking contributions, pay your share or we'll leave, which increased NATO contributions. Someone being led by the nose by Russia.
Why did NATO increase those contributions?
Why did NATO? Because
Trump threatened them? That's bullshit.
They need the United States. We bankroll NATO. We give them money for their military.
That's not why they increased their funding.
That is why they increased their contributions.
That is
because
not
if America doesn't exist in NATO, NATO doesn't exist.
Show me the contract that was signed that this is the reason. Show me the legislation that passed.
The fucking treaty that they signed, dipshit. He was telling them to comply with the fucking treaty they signed. It's in writing. We need to contribute.
Did they sign that under Trump?
GDP.
Hold on. Do you think they signed that under Trump?
No, but they increased their contributions when
motherfucker, they didn't. Of course, you are just a shill at this point.
Honestly, you're such a weak pussy.
Dude, you're a cultist.
These are like 2%.
You're a cultist.
Like
again, Trump says, Trump's words,
Let me
hey, I'm going to stop funding Ukraine. Here's JebTan, the Trump supporter, saying, oh, actually, Trump was really good for Ukraine.
You default to this dumb shit every time.
You're the stupidest motherfucker I've ever met, dude.
I'm giving you evidence over and over.
You haven't given me
What have I said that's a lie? What have I said that's a lie? Point out a lie.
The chatter gave me these 12 points.
Sure, other than that,
the fact that NATO increased their funding because of Trump, lie number 2.
No, I said you can believe whatever you want. I said that Trump demanded that they increase it.
I gave you 2, buddy.
Those weren't lies. No. So
both of them were
one of them was me making fun of you because you had no fucking clue what you were talking about. The other one was not a lie. It was me saying all the evidence points to the fact that they did this because of Trump, because suddenly after he threatened to leave, they increased their contributions. And Trump, it didn't matter whether or not they actually did it because of Trump, because your dipshit, dumbass argument was that Trump was led around by the nose because McMaster said it, but
Yes,
no one let
by his own fucking foreign advisor. Whereas
no one
you
let,
watched the Twitter, you
no
watched
one
the YouTube
led
show
around
one
by
time.
Putin would
You
force
had to watch
NATO
the
to increase
YouTube
their
that had a talking
contributions.
point that you repeated.
No
You
one
didn't look into it.
No one
You didn't
led around by
verify
the nose
it.
by
You
Trump
didn't
would
check.
ever give Ukraine lethal weapons. They
Of
just wouldn't.
course they would. He also.
Wait, what? No, defend that. Someone led around by the nose by Putin would give Ukraine lethal weapons. Explain that one to me.
If I wanted, right, to fulfill my duties and not look like I am
oh my God, the plausible deniability.
Yes.
Anything is explainable with plausible deniability, dude. You can plausible deniability any reality that you fucking want.
True. I don't know if that's true. It's also possible that he changed his mind on Ukraine between the times he armed Ukraine and later on, that Putin influenced him to change his position between the time he armed Ukraine and the time that didn't happen.
Sure, but then through the end of his presidency, he was demanding that NATO increase their contributions to fight against Russia in a potential invasion. But, you know, whatever. That's inconsequential,
he was looking for
an
excuse to get out of NATO, and he's still looking for an excuse to get
Really?
out of
Then
NATO.
why didn't he just get out of NATO?
Do this. He wants
Wait,
to
then
get
why
out
didn't
of
he get out of NATO?
Because he needs an excuse to do it. He can't unilaterally.
He had an excuse. They weren't paying their share. Many countries
so
are far under their share. If he just wanted an excuse, he had an excuse. I'm fucking president, and they're not paying their share. I'm leaving. That's his excuse.
Presidents can just unilaterally do things like that.
Leave NATO?
Can they?
Yeah,
I actually don't know.
I'm pretty sure. Yes, 100%.
No.
It's not a declaration of war.
So just to be clear. So during Trump's tenure, especially after he was, telling them to pay more, they did pay a lot more. You're right that, like, I guess it is impossible to prove that, like, him demanding that they comply with the treaties that they signed, to comply with the 2%.
Well, in December.
Hold on, real quick. It's impossible to prove for a fact that, like, that was the reason. But again, if we're talking about somebody who's led by the nose by Putin, we're specifically talking about Trump's actions here. And his actions is he vehemently demanded that other members of NATO pay more. So why would somebody who's pro-Putin or like being a puppet of Putin advocate and push NATO to raise their funding? And then funding does happen. And then the statement is, well, you can't prove that it happened because he demanded it. Maybe it was because the European nations were just more afraid of Russia.
Because we have to look at what he did afterwards.
Theoretically. Yeah, I guess.
Afterwards, was he like suddenly, NATO is now fulfilling their part of the bargain. I am fully a NATO supporter. I think we're good. No, he's still
they're not,
out of that.
Yeah.
They're still not doing that.
They're still not fulfilling their part of the bargain. But they were doing a better job than they were before Trump threatened to leave.
Yeah, it's like, it's like you got to pay your workers $7.25. That's the minimum wage. Well, I'm paying them $5 now. I was paying them $2 earlier.
The idea that this is wild.
No, it doesn't matter if it's because of Trump. Your claim was that Trump was being led around the nose by Putin, and we're saying even if it didn't work,
you brought it up. Come on,
dude. Stop, Lactoid. He's interrupted me every time I've made this point because he knows it's a good point. Even if it didn't work, Trump made a concerted effort to get NATO to increase their funding. And he expended a dickload of political capital.
It also probably did work.
Yeah, that's the reason why leaving NATO is such a big deal. It takes so much political capital in order to even threaten that. And he expended that political capital in a concerted effort to get NATO to increase their contributions. And then he also armed Ukraine with lethal weapons. And he also gave aid that apparently he intended not to give, but something happened with that. And wires must have got crossed and someone must have hit the give button when he told them to give the take button. But whatever.
Okay, now that I've not interrupted that, again, all you've given me is like, well, Trump said it and then it happened, so it must be because Trump said it would happen. There was no other circumstances in the world.
No, it literally doesn't matter for my argument whether or not it is because. No, you didn't listen to what I just said. You have to it doesn't count not interrupting if you still don't listen to the argument. It doesn't matter if it worked. What matters was he made a concerted effort to do it, and someone being led around by the nose of Putin would not make a concerted effort to increase NATO funding.
He would if there were other factors that he wanted to get out of it other than the successful NATO funding. You can make unreasonable demands, and people do this all the time. They make unreasonable demands expecting them to be turned down so that they can use it in order to do other actions.
So telling them to comply with the treaty they signed is an unreasonable demand.
Or to weaken, because you keep interrupting me because you know my point just blows you out of the water, right?
No, it's a terrible point.
To weaken, right? again, you keep interrupting because you know if people actually listen to what I say and are uninterrupted, you would look retarded. Okay.
No, not at all.
Again, you can't stop yourself. You keep doing it. I think
mean,
you
you're
got this
directly
compulsion.
accusing me
You
of something,
keep
so I'm
doing
gonna
it.
respond
You
every
won't
time
shut
you do
up.
it.
You keep doing it. Okay,
sure.
let's see. Can I say anything without him being interrupted? Let's find out if you have this compulsion. I don't know. Maybe you should seek mental health for this, get a therapist, maybe some medication. Maybe it'll help you out, right? But here's the deal. If you make an unreasonable demand or something that you feel is unreasonable, or you feel that the other party is likely to decline or to refuse, it creates tension within that party or that group or that coalition. It creates conflict, it creates divisiveness, and especially if you are one of the biggest contributors or one of the biggest reasons that NATO exists in the first place and has the teeth it does, which the U.S. is, right? And weakening those ties is actually very beneficial to Putin. Very beneficial. When you have America, when you have American politicians threatening to withhold aid to Ukraine, again, as you said earlier, in your words, Trump reintroduced isolationism to the Republican Party. So once again, we can lay this on the feet of Trump pretty directly.
Sure. So your point was fucking retarded. I mean,
I'm just using your fucking
glad
words,
I let
dude.
you get it out. So
Did you or did you not say that
there's a
Trump
reason
reintroduced
why-
isolation to the
I'm
party?
gonna keep going. So there's a reason why you changed your point after I interrupted you and responded to it the first time.
Okay.
Because first it was if you give them an unreasonable demand, and then I helped you with your argument. I handheld you through it because I know what the better version of your argument was.
I don't want
which
to be
is
retarded.
clearly
so I'm
it's
just
not
to you right
clearly
now,
it's not an unreasonable demand to say, hey, you signed this treaty for 2% of your GDP for military, you got to comply with it, or we're going to stop paying you to comply with it. Clearly that's not unreasonable. I made a very clear statement with Trump, which is that he did bring back the value of isolationism to the party, but I also said in the sense that he brought back the idea that we should probably have a clearer and more, deliberate evaluation process when it comes to international conflict, which we should. And part of that is saying if we are paying foreign nations to comply with the treaty and they are not complying with the treaty, we should threaten to stop paying them to comply with that treaty that they are not complying with. It's not an unreasonable demand. And if that treaty is literally designed to aggress against another nation in their eyes, that nation would never twist Donald Trump by the nose into increasing funding for it. It's a ridiculous.
So if Ukraine, if the U.S. cuts off funding to Ukraine, do you think that helps or hurts Putin?
If Trump did that in his presidency,
if the US,
that probably would have helped.
If the U.S. cuts off funding and weapons to Ukraine, does that help or hurt?
Oh, I see. You're moving on to the hypothetical future.
I'm just
presidency
asking a question.
now.
See how
Sure.
honest you are. Is that helpful?
No, yeah, that would help Putin. Good thing you didn't do it.
Great. So again, in 2024, on June 16th, as Politico is reporting,
oh, good.
when
So
Trump
we're
is
not going to
threatening
concede
do
the
this,
past presidency. We're going to move on to the future one again. I told you I will
already
not.
told you.
I
already told you I'm just not
the
going to
future
listen to
presidency
you.
conversation.
Right?
Wait, hold on, real quick. What point is this? Would that help or hurt Putin? Therefore, he's like being led by the nose by Putin. Oh, hold on. Would it help or hurt Putin if Kamala Harris would fire a nuclear weapon directly at Moscow? Would it help or hurt Putin?
I heard him.
Oh, but if she didn't do that, that would help Putin, right?
No.
Chill.
Okay, so
it wouldn't change the state. There's a state that exists where we are funding Ukraine. That's a state that exists. If you change that state into a negative state, it does help.
Well, no, hold on. I don't know. Like, hold on. We are sending money.
Introducing a new state.
We choose to send.
Weapon, right?
Give me 1 second.
To add that new state doesn't help.
Hold on.
It doesn't change things.
In a state of spending money, that's not like a state. Like we choose to send money in packages over and over again, right? So like we could decide to stop sending packages of aid to Ukraine, or we could just choose to not do that again. I don't see how that's substantially different than choosing not to fire a nuclear weapon at Moscow. Just because something happens to like
between choosing to keep doing something and choosing to do something new. But that's almost beside the point. Right? The fact that
I disagree. What I'm trying to point out here is just because something technically doesn't hurt or helps Putin doesn't necessarily go towards whether or not their policy as a whole is like pro-Putin or anti-Putin. I think that the United States I think that we do have a interest here in trying to get Ukraine to sign a peace treaty with Russia. I think that we do have a interest here in telling Russia, look, we got to come to some kind of peace treaty because Russia's not going to back off the shit they already took in Crimea, especially, and the Donbass especially, and that needs to be conceded in a peace treaty. And Ukraine will not do it without pressure from the United States. And with Kamala, they're not going to get pressure from the United States. They're just going to keep getting more bombs and more guns, and we're going to have a forever war for the next how many fucking years? Afghanistan 2.0. It's going to be awful.
I reject that premise. So I am not privy to the Ukrainian strategy of going into Kursk, but they obviously think they're going to succeed. They obviously think they're going to achieve some sort of strategic advantage.
They've been stopped already.
This idea that Ukraine can't win, I just reject. I think Ukraine can win. I didn't think so a year ago.
Win what? Win what?
The war. Get their land back.
What does Vic? Oh, really?
Yes.
You think that they're gonna get back Crimea?
I think there's a possibility that they can. Yes.
Wait, Crimea too? Because I disagree with Crimea.
Donbass and the Donbass.
Donbass and Luhansk.
Luhansk.
Donetsk and Luhansk.
Well, but they've said they're not going to give it up until they get Crimea. Obviously, they got to be reined in a little bit there, right, Wick?
Maybe, but I don't think we should rein them in to the extent where we keep them from getting the Donbass. I can't pronounce these words. You know what I mean.
Well, the Donetsk and Luhansk. Yeah. Here's my solution, which is what I want to see Trump put forward, is basically a threat to both sides. Like, tell Russia, like, come to the table, otherwise we're going to triple our funding, and then tell Ukraine, like, come to the table, otherwise we're going to cut all your funding, and then like compel both parties. Look, financially, you have to come and negotiate a peace.
I don't think we have leverage over Russia in this, honestly.
I think that if we were to triple our military funding to Ukraine, I think that's leverage.
I think that if we said we are going to step in, we can't
do that. That's a red line. There's no way we can do that. Are you in favor of us doing that? Please say no.
No, I am not.
Okay.
Please say no.
But,
well, that helps Putin though, doesn't it? By us not intervening.
To an extent, yes.
Okay.
But again, we gotta things.
Yes. Again, we can't send troops there. Yes, thank you. With nuance,
we could do a no-fly zone, however. I think that we can.
No, we can't do a no-fly zone. That involves shooting down Russian jets.
Yeah.
We did it. We've done it before. We've shot down Russian jets all the time.
We haven't established
NATO members that shut down Russian
jets.
No,
establishing a new no-fly zone is totally different. That's
war.
That's what Russia did. They're like butting into Ukrainian territory and saying, we protect this now. It's like, yeah, you're technically not aggressing. You're technically being defensive, but you're like you're being offensively defensive. You're like getting in someone's face and then being like, you touch me, I'm going to shoot you.
We cannot do a no-fly zone. This is not an option. Unless we want to go to war with Russia.
I don't think again. I think that they're blustering when they say that. I don't think there's any way, shape, or form that if we put a no-fly zone, what would cause Putin to go to war with America is boots on the ground or a missile strike on a Russian soil.
Well, no. Here's what happens. We declare a no-fly zone, and we have got to enforce that. So we send our jets manned by U.S. pilots.
Mm-hmm.
Russia shoots down those jets. What's our reaction? U.S. jets getting shot down by Russian missiles. What are we going to do?
Well, I think we've had American troops being attacked by the Wagner Group and other Russian assets. So we know our Russian assets. That's happened before.
Yes, there have been isolated incidences of private military companies, by the way, which have I know what event you're talking about.
Yes,
they were very careful to not associate with Russia when that battle happened. This is different. We're talking about U.S. flagged warplanes shooting down Russian flagged warplanes and exchange of fire.
I think that if we put that no-fly zone
units
up, do you think that if we put that no-fly zone up, do you think that Russia would officially engage with a U.S. manned and U.S. Official U.S. aircraft in that no-fly zone? I don't think they would. I think they'd back the fuck down. I don't think they do.
If they're shooting down Russian jets, they have to. If they're shooting down Russian jets, they have to.
Well, the only reason they'd be shooting down Russian jets is if the Russian jets were violating that airspace.
And they would, because they're currently in a war.
Well, like I said, they've done it before. We've shot down jets before, Russian jets. Turkey shot down some Russian jets in 2017.
Yeah, over Turkish airspace. And by the way, that was a major event, and that was like they had to negotiate like terms on that. Like that wasn't just like no big deal. Like,
I think a reason
Turkish airspace.
let's talk. If we're talking about potential extrapolations from what could happen, I don't think the only bad outcome is America getting pulled into a war. You should be against this, Wick, because if we do a no-fly zone in Ukraine, and now U.S. planes are getting shot down, and U.S. troops are dying in Ukraine, you're fucked. Republicans are going to have a hard line. They're just going to say no more Ukraine funding. We're done. We have troops dying in Ukraine. No, we're out. That's forever war shit. That's a slow trickle of, well, just a few guys' lives don't matter. Over
It's not
extended
that-
period of time leads
Hold
to
on,
thousands
I
and
reject
thousands
this
of lives
notion
that don't matter.
It's American lives don't
It's-
matter, and that's why we're sending that out.
No,
We
no, I get.
absolutely
I'm saying
matter.
what the Republicans can draw a red line on, and I would agree with them. I don't think we
Republicans
have
are
any
already
need
looking
for.
to cut off Ukraine funding. A lot
Why
of them are.
should I mean they just voted for it, so I resent that. But people dying in Ukraine is a reasonable thing to have a hard line about. No, I don't think we don't need. If you think Ukraine can win, why do we need to go get U.S. troops killed there?
The only reason I'm even putting a no-fly zone up is because Lactoid asked me, right, if I would be okay with troops on the ground in Russia, or if I would be okay with a direct military strike in Russia. We were talking about how we can pressure Russia and what leverage we have against them to bring them to the table. And I think that it would need to be something like a no-fly zone. It could not be simply an increase in funding. I don't think that this would substantively pressure them enough that they would give up any of their gains at this point.
I disagree. It couldn't be a no. I just think those are non-options, right? We're talking about putting American
Well, I don't think
military
tripling
assets.
the funding, tripling our
Well,
contributions
we're
is
talking
gonna work.
about, we're talking about putting military, like U.S. soldiers and U.S. Assets in play in a country that's not even our ally, right?
Yeah.
They're not a NATO ally.
$5 from Cameraman 502 asks a very pertinent question.
I mean-
If Russia is willing to fly into Ukrainian airspace under a no-fly zone to attack U.S. Air Force planes, why would they bend to threats of Ukraine getting triple the funding?
They wouldn't, hold on. They would be flying into Ukrainian airspace specifically to attack Ukrainian targets, and then America would have to shoot down the Russian planes.
Yes.
And then if that starts happening, like holy shit! Like now we're in a lot of trouble. Now we have exchange of fire between Russian and American flagged military personnel, and now we're in a fucking war. We just got out of Afghanistan. Now we're in another one. When's this one going to end?
When we win. Honestly, look, I'm
Oh,
never
yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, well, victory accomplished, right?
Do you think the United States? Hold on,
I think the American
United
hegemony
States
is
should have
based
a-
actually Pax Americana.
No, no.
I think we should be more involved.
You don't know what I'm going to
Yeah,
ask.
especially when it costs a bunch of money and we got to increase
Do you
inflation
think
to
the
do it.
United States, as an entire country, all of us that have to pay taxes toward it, do you think we should have a say in what the terms for victory are?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if
So
one
if a
entire political
majority of
side
Americans vote for
simply
Kamala,
says- sure.
will you accept that?
Yeah, of course. I've never not accepted.
No,
an election.
not her winning. Not her winning. No, I'm not talking about that. Will you accept that America wants to be involved in these foreign wars?
No, I'm not saying lack of involvement. I'm saying pulling back on Ukraine, because the issue is when we were bringing up is Trump damaging to Ukraine, you brought up a single instance of Republicans withholding some funding for Ukraine. So what my concern is, where is your line where we get to start saying, hey, we probably need to pull back because, and I'm not saying that line has been met. I don't think it has.
Sure.
But if they do get back Donetsk and Luhansk and say, we're going to continue into Crimea, or they say, strategically, it makes sense to go for Crimea first,
So
which is
I
the more
think
likely
that-
situation, do you think the United States should cut off funding?
No, I think that Biden's red line when it comes to not allowing munitions to be shot into Russian areas, right? Russian things. Because here's a problem: is one of the things that is handcuffing or handicapping the Ukrainian forces is they're not allowed to strike at artillery sites that are in Russia that are currently shelling them. Right? They're not allowed. Right? They can't use U.S. munitions, at least, to do that. They're not allowed to do that, which puts them at a disadvantage because Russia can shoot at them, but they can't shoot at Russia. I
Sure.
want that restriction to be gone.
I think they mostly got rid of that after the.
It's only been a couple places that they've allowed it. It's not a blanket lifting of the restriction. I think that.
I mean, they're occupying Russia proper right now, right? I mean,
Yeah, but
in small parts, but
yeah.
still.
Yeah, and here's my thing is like specifically, you really think if they tell the U.S., sorry, hands are tied, we actually need to go for Crimea first. We're going to take back Crimea before going
It's
after
part of
Donetsk and Luhansk.
Ukraine.
But that's not been a stated military objective that the U.S. supports. You don't think that the Republicans would have any right to say, nope, we're done. We're
So
done.
originally,
Next, right? Is
when
Georgia next? Let's get back to Georgia.
actually, you're wrong on this, because originally when the U.S. made the restriction on no, you can't put strikes into Russia proper, munitions and U.S. munitions can't be used against Russia proper. Ukrainians asked them, "What about Crimea?" And U.S. said, "Nah, Crimea is cool."
No, I'm not saying attack Crimea. I'm saying they try to take back Crimea.
Yes.
Territorially, they try to take Crimea back.
Yes, they should.
That was not a stated objective we have approved of. You will not find anywhere us saying, yeah, you know what, we'll help. That's fine. But this is where I'm saying is like, well, I think we need a Republican Party that's even more strict than I would be, because we have a Democrat Party who's just going to kind of say whatever Ukraine wants, they get.
At this point, not anything. Like, I'm not okay with any like war crime shit, right? Obviously. But and if they start doing like attacks against civilians, that would be my red line.
They've been doing that since 2014.
Like again, they were
the
talking
shellings of
the
Donetsk and Luhansk.
little green men, right? That was being sent in.
No, I'm talking about the shelling of Donetsk and Luhansk that's been happening since 2014.
I have to look into that more, to be honest with you.
You should. There's actually kind of a sordid history, and like the reality is, when it comes to the Donbass specifically in Crimea, Russia doesn't come with this with no justification. There actually is kind of like some split argument you can make here on these specific territories. It's not as cut and dry as Russia big bad guy, Ukrainian good. It is a coup, literally. A democratically elected president, Yanukovych, who was elected under UN supervision.
Oh, are you talking about the orange color revolution thing, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about Euromaidan, where you have people remove Yanukovych, who was an elected leader. They removed him unconstitutionally. We can get into this.
And why did they do that?
So they removed him because he reversed course on the EU, joining the EU, and instead reversed course instead that he wanted to join the EAU, or the Eurasian Economic Union. So he wanted to join basically an economic bloc that consists of Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, and a couple other countries as well, right? And his changing course on this, despite the fact that he was the elected president of Ukraine, was so unpopular that it motivated large groups of people, especially in the West, near Kiev, to rise up and to throw him out of power. The problem is he had support. His support base was in the east of Ukraine, right? Donbass and Crimea. And they did not have the required, by the Constitution of Ukraine, did not have the required votes to remove him. But they removed him anyway. So they kicked him out unconstitutionally. And if you kick out a president unconstitutionally when their bases of support are in Crimea or in the Donbass, it's not particularly surprising when they're like, no, fuck you, now we're going to declare independence. We don't want to be part of a country that kicks out our democratically elected president.
Most of those people did not declare independence. Most of the people in the Donbass and Luhansk want to remain a part. Again, I know you can cite this. I know what you're going to say. I will cite
you poll after poll after poll on this, especially in Crimea.
Well, yeah, Crimea, when they had those elections after Russia military was in there roaming the streets with guns and stuff.
I'm talking about before. I'm talking about in 2011. I'm talking about when the UN conducted polls in 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2012 in Crimea. This is before Euromaidan. This was before the Russians ever went in there. And overwhelmingly, the people of Crimea wanted to leave Ukraine and join Russia. Specifically, that's how they polled in UN-sponsored polling. You can find this on Wikipedia. This is not hidden knowledge. The people there did not want to be part of Ukraine because back in 1996, they voted in a referendum to be split in the government autonomously from Ukraine, and Ukraine just ignored that referendum and said, no, fuck you, you're part of the unitary government. And so the people there do not like Ukraine. They haven't liked Ukraine since the fall of the Soviet Union. They've wanted to leave the country. And when Euromaidan happened, when their candidate was removed, of course they're going to want to leave the country. Again, it's a little bit more complicated than just Russia bad. I'm not saying that Russia's justified in everything they've done. They absolutely looks like they committed war crimes in North Ukraine when they launched that invasion. I don't think that was justified whatsoever.
Again, this isn't justification. Whether it's true or not, this is no justification for anything that Russia has done, neither in
Crimea
or
in
I
disagree with that.
Donbass or Luhansk.
No, I disagree. I don't think they were justified in Crimea, but I also don't think it matters because what I'm talking about right now isn't whatchamacallit, Ukraine has been clear this whole time that they were going to take back Crimea and we supported them and then blah, 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 blah. No. That's never been a stated objective up until recently. And the U.S. has never backed the objective of retaking Crimea. And so my thing is if it's
U.S. backs it or not, I think that Ukraine, we should not shackle Ukraine by having to approve their war objectives before we go
but here's the thing. But here's the issue: is I disagree. That's why I asked you that question. Do you think America has a say in the like qualifications for victory and things like that? What I mean is, do you think that if they're taking our money, we have a right to have a say in how they do things, in what they do, what aims they attack first with our weapons and things like that? I think we do.
Do we have the
I
ability
think it's reasonable.
to? Absolutely, but
should we?
No.
We should have a say in how
aside
countries using our gifted weapons
aside
operate,
from
100%.
very specific things like don't purposely target civilians or we're going to stop giving it to you. Fair enough. Those are fine. But when you think, well, no, you can attack this objective, but we're not going to let you attack this objective. I don't like that. I want to see those. I'm advocating right now for those restrictions to be lifted because I think it hamstrings their war effort. It's politicians trying to play war, right? We don't need that. That's one of the reasons we had such struggles.
We're the best. We're the best at war, though. So I feel like our input is definitely welcome. And one of the reasons we're the best.
Our generals are. Our politicians are definitely not.
You think generals aren't consulted? You think your president, the one that you love so much, Joe Biden, is so fucking dumb that he's not having generals help him dictate what these red lines are? You think he's just fucking, yeah, you know what?
They
Fuck
help,
it.
But when the decision comes, the decision is in ultimately the hands of the politicians. That's how America runs.
Sure. My thing is, the way I think things should be, obviously the president should be consulting with generals when these red lines come up, but we should absolutely be dictating the way that they use our weapons. We should absolutely be dictating the way it's the same. But again, this is the same thing that Democrats feel about other things. You shouldn't tell people how to use welfare. You shouldn't tell people how to use anything that the government hands them out. I think that if we are gifting something to another nation, we don't forget we should. We have a responsibility. It is 100% a gift.
It's not a gift. If you're putting conditions on it, it's not a gift. Straight up.
Okay, look.
Sure,
so
you're right. It shouldn't be a gift. We are donating. It is a donation, and we should have a say, just like donors to other charities do, in how that donation is used. Is that better terminology for you?
In some cases, yes, but in other cases, it becomes very Karenish, right? It becomes very micromanaging. But go ahead.
I mean, it's not micromanaging to say you don't get to take back an entire swath of territory.
Wait, hold on. Do you think that they should be, if Russia is using a platform in Russia proper to shell a Ukrainian town, do you think that they should be able to use? I'm not talking legally, right? I'm talking morally. What do you support, Lactoid or JebTan? Do you think that they should be able to blow up that? So you are for lifting some of these restrictions too?
Some of them, we've already lifted some of them. Yeah,
we should.
100%. I don't think Joe Biden has dealt with this perfectly. I think he's done a good job generally dealing with this. But no, I think if he lifted the restrictions sooner, then we wouldn't be in the forever war problem. Part of the forever war issue is this sort of daintiness with which we treat the conflict, right? And we shouldn't even be having conversations about no-fly zones and U.S. troop involvement if we're not even letting the Ukrainian troops just kind of fucking do their thing. Like, yeah, we should let them attack Russian objectives. We should let them attack objectives in Crimea that are firing off at them, sure. But no, if they say we're going to take back Crimea before Donetsk and Luhansk, I would tell them hard no. You will not get a single American dime if you do that, because we are first and foremost here to get you Donetsk and Luhansk back, and then we may have an evaluation where we meet together and decide the feasibility of anything further. But we are not allowing you to do strategically, though. It just kind of makes sense to go after this first. So sorry, U.S., we're going to use your weapons to take something we haven't really talked with you about taking.
If they can win the war by going after Crimea first, they should.
I disagree.
I mean,
there's a lot of things they can win the war by doing that we shouldn't do, but and we don't let them do those things. You can win the war by doing a lot of things you shouldn't do and that we shouldn't support.
Yeah, but there's nothing immoral about taking back Crimea.
Here's the problem with Republican isolationism, because like I'm also a pretty isolationist person myself. Is the Republican version of isolationism is extremely inconsistent. So you'll sit here and say, the Republicans will sit here and say stuff like this on Ukraine. And I'm not saying that you in particular will do this.
Sure.
But when we bring the same stuff up as like fellow isolationists and bring up Israel or the rest of the Middle East, the entire tone fucking flips. It's literally just on Ukraine.
No, not for me. We have red lines for Israel too. Israel's fighting a very different enemy, so those red lines are going to be different. But at the end of the day, right, we can tell Ukraine, you cannot, there's an unacceptable level of targeting civilians in this way, and be very meticulous about it and give very hard guidelines. We can't really give those same guidelines to Israel because they're not fighting someone who meaningfully discerns between military objective and civilian area.
I would argue that Russia doesn't
at least
either.
does that. I mean, they do, right? They draft their citizens and things like that, but no, they're not fucking putting bomb shelters for their troops under hospitals and elementary schools.
They are targeting civilian areas, though.
No, yes, they're targeting civilian areas. I agree. Russia is targeting civilians, and that's bad. What I'm saying is you can't make Israel refuse to target civilian areas under the same guidelines as you can with Ukraine.
That's because
Russia actually will separate.
I don't want to get into Israel-Palestine debate, and it is 9. I just noticed, and I do have to go because people are requiring my attention here. I love you all.
Can I get a closing real quick before we go?
Yes, you can all get closings. But then we're gonna leave. But I got a hard out now because I just noticed it's 9:08, and I got people that need my attention here. We'll end with you, Lactoid. Actually, I will give my closing first, then we'll go to Vigilante, the JebTan, then we'll end with Lactoid. He can have the last word. We've gotten off topic, but here we are. I am not here to say that the Democratic Party is perfect. I am not here to say that the Democratic Party has done or is doing nothing wrong or nothing anti-democratic. That is not my point. My point is that we can't look at these things without the context of when they are taking place and how they are taking place. Nor can we talk about these things without some form of comparison. We have to have something to compare it to. Is it better or worse? Now, we can still condemn it, even if it is better than the other side, and I do so. But if we're going to talk about these things, we need to keep in mind Trump is the one that has actually attempted these things. He's not just talked about it. He's just not threatened it. He's not made speeches about it. He's actually done it. He put a plan into place and he executed that plan. Luckily, thankfully, it was stopped. Mike Pence had the courage of his convictions, and he's a true American hero for what he did on January 6th. But yes, Democrats being a threat to democracy, just not in any serious way. I'm going to give the mic to Vigilante, then we're going to JebTan, then Lactoid. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would generally agree. And me and Jeb talked about this whenever I saw that he was added to the group. Like, both sides can potentially be threats. Like, there's things that both sides do that are potential threats to democracy, and I don't think anybody's really going to deny that. It's more of the issue of who's doing the things that have a bigger potential to be a long-term threat or even just straight up end democracy. And while some of the things that the Democrats want to do are threats, or some of the things that they are doing as a party in certain states are threats, there are things that the Republicans are doing that are significantly bigger threats. There are things that Trump wants to do himself that are significantly bigger threats. And that's why you don't really hear too much about what the Dems do on this kind of stuff very often, because there are bigger issues, like the shit that Trump has been trying to do, or was trying to do whenever the election initially happened. There's the shit that he's been talking going into this election about what he wants to do in his future presidency. So,
where can people find you?
You can find me at The Vigilante TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. I actually just changed my YouTube username.
Check them out, gang. Thank you for being here. JebTan, go ahead.
Yeah. So, whatchamacallit? I agree that it's about both likelihood and severity. And while I do think Trump's issues are more acutely severe, here's what practically happened. I had to experience a very crazy day on inauguration day. That sucked. I did not want to experience that day. The riots were terrible, and I never want to experience that again. That does suck. Doesn't suck more than maybe permanently losing my right to own or carry a firearm. It certainly doesn't suck more than for the potential packing of courts. It definitely doesn't suck more than maybe not being able to buy a house for the next 10 years because our president can't help but subsidize demand side only, and not give very much relief to the supply side in any meaningful way. So, one, practically, Trump did nothing really that like actively posed a threat to democracy because it got squashed super easily by judges who were still in power. Two, the likelihood of him being able to do it again is even lower than before because while you can say everything you want about who he's hired and blah blah blah, he can't run again. And unless you think the Supreme Court is randomly going to bend the knee to him, which, if you actually look at the Supreme Court's voting record, they have not acquiesced to Republicans on everything. In fact, they've been very even-handed in terms of just following strict originalist sort of a doctrine and making decisions that are fairly bipartisan. So that's my stance. I'm still not voting for Trump, but if I was in a swing state, I would be forced to at this point after the Kamala and the DNC's platforms, respectively, have sort of been cleared up a little bit, because I think she's going to be catastrophic, not really mainly for democracy, just catastrophic for the economy primarily and gun rights, with the added flavor of a threat to democracy.
Where can people find you?
JebTan RIP on Twitter. I do not really stream.
Well, thank you for being here, and I'm sure
Thank you for having me.
people can find you if they want, and check him out, gang. I do appreciate it, despite me yelling at him and calling him a retard. He still is a retard, but I love him anyway. You're a lovable retard, my favorite. Lactoid, go ahead.
So the definition that I presented at the beginning of this, which was somewhat disagreed with but wasn't really rebutted, was a two-part definition. I think satisfying either of these is sufficient to say that it is a threat to democracy. One, organizing or using a system to limit actual voter options and establish legal but oligopolic control. And two, using arguably legal mechanisms to undermine critical elements of functionality of the US government and its constitution. When Wick just gave his closing, he said that he's not here to say that the Democrats aren't doing wrong things, and that he even said that they're not doing things. He's not here to say that they're not doing things that are undemocratic. Frankly, I see this just as a concession to the point of my tweet, specifically that Democrats are a threat to democracy. This comparison that he's referring to, I'm positing here, is smokescreen for the perpetual whataboutism of the Democratic machine that exists whenever Democrats face critique for what they do. Both myself and JebTan agreed that both Trump and Democrats pose a threat to democracy. We don't play the whataboutism game. Instead, we establish a baseline of undemocratic behavior, what we define as a threat to democracy, that we find worth criticizing. And then we analyze all the different aspects that come to an answer on which threat we are primarily concerned about. During this whole debate, I have not received any substantive pushback as to the merit of these allegations that I've presented, simply deflections to Trump. Just so we know, the things that I've presented, including the superdelegate system, which we're all agreement is bullshit. The lawsuits to keep different candidates off the ballot in certain states, including Jill Stein, Cornel West, and RFK. The removal of Trump from the ballot in Colorado. The pressured removal of Biden from the election and the unelected ascension of Kamala Harris, despite her widespread unpopularity in the first primary. There was no guarantee she would win a primary. And the second definition, again, the lawfare perpetuated by Trump, pressuring social media to censor opposition to Biden's policies, the appointment of non-originalist justices, and consistent threats to pack the court. All of these are real things that the Democrats are doing and have consistently done. I understand that, especially during this time, when we're closing in November, people want to say, well, fuck, I mean, sure, whatever, but Trump, look at the other side, look at the other side, look at the other side. And I'm not saying that people can't take time to use their time to focus on the issues that are important to them, which is why, Wick and Destiny and Josiah and these other people who are more pro-Democrat absolutely spend a disproportionate amount of time targeting Trump and talking about how bad Trump is and how much of a threat to democracy Trump is. But this discussion was not about that. This discussion was about the Democrats being a threat to democracy. I think I have, without any real substantive argument to the alternative, I have proven that the Democrats are a threat to democracy. We should just recognize that. You can think Trump is a bigger one, but they are a threat to democracy, and we should treat them as such.
Where can people find you?
Oh, and if you like what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks.
No, thanks for being here. Lactoid, always fun to spar with you. I will let the viewers decide who they think did better. And gang, if you like this content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Tune in tomorrow. We're going to have undecided voters and third-party voters on to discuss why they're voting third party or why they're undecided. And it's not a debate so much as a conversation. So check us out. This was a debate. Tomorrow will be a conversation. I love you all, and I will see you tomorrow. I gotta go.